The bank called me and said, "Mr. Freeman, I do not think that is you sitting in my office right now because your wife is here holding the hand of a man who looks exactly like you and they are liquidating your accounts." I replied, "That is impossible. She is on a church retreat in Atlanta." The voice on the line lowered to a whisper and said, "Please come immediately. Use the service entrance and do not tell a soul." My name is Bernard Freeman, but everyone calls me Bernie. I am 70 years old, and I have spent my life calculating the breaking point of steel and concrete. I am a retired structural engineer. I built bridges that carry thousands of cars every day. I designed foundations that hold up the tallest skyscrapers in this city. I know exactly how much pressure a structure can take before it snaps. But as I sat on that park bench, staring at a half-eaten ham sandwich wrapped in wax paper, I realized I had no idea how much pressure a man could take before he broke. Before I tell you what I saw behind that one-way mirror, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a snake in the grass. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of Tuesday that feels like every other Tuesday when you are retired. The sun was shining through the oak trees in the city park. I was wearing my usual attire, a faded flannel shirt, work boots that had seen better days, and a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. To the people walking by, walking their expensive dogs and drinking their $6 coffees, I looked like nobody. Just another old black man eating a cheap lunch. Maybe a janitor on his break. Maybe a man down on his luck. They saw the rust on my 15-year-old Ford pickup truck parked at the curb. They did not see the 7-figure balance in my offshore accounts. They did not know that I lived frugally by choice, not by necessity. I was raised to believe that wealth screams but wealth whispers. I preferred the whisper. My phone buzzed on the wooden bench. It was a private number. I usually ignore those, but something told me to answer. "Mr. Freeman." The voice was tight, anxious. It was Henderson, the branch manager of First City Bank. "Hello, Henderson. I am eating lunch. Is there a problem with the wire transfer?" Mr. Freeman listened to me very carefully. "We have a code red situation here." I stopped chewing. Code red. That was a security protocol I had designed myself 30 years ago when I consulted on the bank, is underground vault construction. It meant an identity breach. It meant immediate danger. "What are you talking about, Henderson?" "Your wife, Beatrice. She is in my office right now." I chuckled, a dry sound that scraped my throat. "You are mistaken, Henderson. Beatrice is in Atlanta. She left this morning for the annual Baptist Women's Conference. I drove her to the airport myself. I saw her walk through security." There was a pause on the line, a silence so heavy I could feel the weight of it. "Mr. Freeman, I am looking at her. She is wearing that blue floral dress she likes, and she is not alone. She is with you. Or at least she is with a man who is wearing your gray Sunday suit, your gold retirement watch, and who has your identification. They are filling out the paperwork to withdraw the entire balance of your primary pension fund in cash." The ham sandwich turned to ash in my mouth. My heart, which usually beat with the slow, steady rhythm of a man at peace, began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. The gray suit. The one I had bought for my daughter Keisha is graduation 10 years ago. The one I kept in the back of the closet in a garment bag. And the watch, my father's watch. I checked my wrist. It was bare. I had left it on the nightstand this morning because the leather strap was chafing my skin. "Hold them there, Henderson. I am 5 minutes away." "Dumb. Do not come in the front door, Mr. Freeman. If this is what I think it is, we cannot spook them. Use the service entrance in the alley, the one with the biometric lock. I will meet you in the security observation room." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. I have not felt fear since I dangled from a suspension cable in 1985. This was not fear, it was rage, a cold, hard rage that started in my gut and spread to my fingers. I walked to my truck. I did not run. A man running attracts attention. A man walking with purpose just looks like he has a job to do. I climbed into the cab of my old Ford. The engine roared to life, a sound I usually loved, but today it sounded like a growl. I pulled into traffic, cutting off a BMW without blinking. Beatrice, my wife of 40 years, the woman who prayed over our breakfast every morning, the woman who scolded me for using coarse language, the woman who was supposed to be singing hymns in Atlanta right now. I thought about the last 10 years, the separate bedrooms, The polite conversations about the weather. The way she pulled away when I tried to touch her shoulder. I thought it was just aging. I thought we were just two old people drifting apart like ice floes. I did not realize she was building a raft to sail away with my life. I parked the truck in the loading zone behind the bank. I knew the cameras were watching me. I walked to the steel door that looked like part of the wall. I placed my hand on the scanner. It hummed and clicked. Access granted. I still had clearance. Henderson respected the man who built his fortress. Henderson was waiting for me in the hallway, his face pale and sweating. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Bernie, I am so sorry," he whispered. I tried to stall them. I told them the vault timer needed 20 minutes to reset. Take me to the glass. We walked into the security room. It was dark, lit only by the glow of a dozen monitors. But I did not look at the screens. I looked through the large one-way mirror that overlooked the main executive office. And there they were. It was like looking into a twisted funhouse mirror. Beatrice was sitting in the leather guest chair. She looked radiant. She was not wearing the modest expression she wore at home. Her legs were crossed. She was leaning forward, her eyes sparkling with an excitement I had not seen in decades. She was smiling, a genuine hungry smile. And next to her was me, or rather a man who had been carefully crafted to look like me. He was my height. He had my build. He was wearing my gray suit, which fit him slightly better than it fit me. He had a prosthetic nose that mimicked the bump I got from a construction accident in the 90s. He wore a gray wig cut in my exact style. He even had my glasses. But it was the way Beatrice touched him that made me want to vomit. She had her hand on his knee. She was stroking the fabric of my suit with her thumb. She leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and the imposter laughed. It was a coarse, loud laugh. Not my laugh. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice sounding like grinding stones. "We do not know," Henderson said. "But his ID checks out. It is a high-quality forgery. If I did not know you personally, Bernie, I would have processed the transaction without a second thought." I watched the imposter pick up the pen. He held it in his left hand. "I am right-handed." "He is signing the authorization," Henderson said, pointing to the glass. "He is forging your signature. Beatrice provided the power of attorney documents claiming you have early-onset dementia and need assistance, but that you are lucid enough to sign today." Dementia. That was their angle. That was the narrative. I watched the pen move across the paper. I watched Beatrice watching the pen. Her eyes were not on the man. They were on the paper. They were on the money. She looked at Henderson, who was back in the room with them. I could see him on the other side of the glass, playing his part while I stood next to his deputy in the dark room. "Mr. Henderson, how much longer?" the imposter asked. His voice was a rasp deeper than mine. "Just a few moments," Mr. Freeman Henderson said inside the room. "The system is verifying the liquidity." I stood there in the dark, clutching the back of a chair so hard my knuckles turned gray. I had a choice. I could burst through that door right now. I could tackle the imposter. I could scream at Beatrice. I could call the police and have them arrested for fraud right here, right now. It would be satisfying. It would be explosive. But then I looked at Beatrice again. I saw the way she checked her phone nervously. I saw the notification pop up on her screen. "I have excellent eyesight for my age." The message read, "Gavin says the jet is ready. Do not mess this up." Gavin. My son-in-law. The white boy from Connecticut who married my daughter Keisha. The investment banker who always looked at my truck with disdain. The man who called me Pops with a sneer. If Gavin was involved, this was not just a wife stealing from a husband. This was a conspiracy. This was a network. If I arrested them now, Beatrice would claim she was duped. She would claim this man tricked her. She would play the victim. Gavin would stay in the shadows. They would escape with a slap on the wrist, and I would be the angry old man who almost had a heart attack in a bank. No, I am an engineer. You do not fix a crack in the foundation by painting over it. You dig. You find the source of the rot. You expose the entire structural failure. Henderson, his voice came over the intercom into the security room. "Bernie, what do you want me to do? I can trigger the silent alarm. The police are 2 minutes away." I watched the imposter finish signing. I watched Beatrice squeeze his hand in victory. "Do not call the police," I said. What Henderson asked, his voice shocking. "They are stealing $400,000, Bernie. That is your pension." "Let them take it," I said. "Bernie, Are you crazy? I turned to the deputy standing next to me. Do you have those GPS trackers? The little ones you put in the die packs for bank robbers? Yes, sir, the deputy said. Put one in the bag, do not use the die pack, just the tracker. And put a second tracker deep in the lining of the bag itself in case they switch the money, Bernie Henderson said over the intercom. You are letting them walk out of here with nearly $500,000. It is not just money, Henderson. It is bait. I watched them. I watched the man who was wearing my life. I watched the woman who had shared my bed. They were not just stealing my past, they were trying to steal my future. Give them the money I ordered. And Henderson, make sure you wish them a wonderful trip to Atlanta. I saw Henderson on the other side of the glass take a deep breath. He opened the drawer. He began counting the stacks of cash. Beatrice's eyes widened. She licked her lips. It was a look of pure avarice, a look of hunger. I realized then that I did not know this woman. The Beatrice I loved had died a long time ago. This was a stranger, a predator, and she had no idea that she was not the hunter. She was the prey. I watched them pack the money into a leather duffel bag. My leather duffel bag, the one I used for the gym. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, the imposter said, standing up. Yes, thank you, God bless you, Beatrice added. Using God, his name, while she committed a felony. They turned to leave. I stood in the dark room, my eyes fixed on the back of my own gray suit, walking out the door. Follow them on the cameras, I told the deputy. I want to know what car they get into. I want the license plate. And send the tracker signal to my phone. Yes, sir. I walked out of the security room back into the alley. The sun was still shining, but the world felt colder, darker. I climbed back into my truck. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like cardboard. My phone pinged. The tracker was active. They were moving south toward the interstate, not toward the airport, toward the casino district. Gavin says the jet is ready. So my son-in-law was the pilot of this crash. I started the engine. I was not going to intervene. Not yet. I was going to watch. I was going to learn. And when the time was right, I was going to bring the whole structure down on top of their heads. I drove out of the alley. I was no longer Bernie, the retired engineer. I was Bernie, the architect of their destruction. And the first brick had just been laid. The headlights swept across the living room wall like searchlights in a prison yard. I sat in my leather recliner, the one with the cracked armrest that Beatrice had been nagging me to throw out for 5 years. The house was dark except for the street lamp outside casting long shadows through the blinds. I had checked the tracker on my phone 10 minutes ago. It showed her car turning onto our street. I was not just a husband waiting for his wife. I was an investigator waiting for a suspect. I was a structural engineer watching a bridge vibrate in a high wind, waiting to see if the cables would snap. The garage door rumbled open, shaking the floorboards beneath my feet. I did not move. I did not turn on the lamp. I sat in the dark and listened to the sounds of my life falling apart. The heavy thud of the car door, the click of her heels on the concrete, the jingle of keys, the groan of the door from the garage to the kitchen. "Honey, I am home," Beatrice called out. Her voice was bright, too bright. It was the voice of a woman performing a role. "I am in the den, Beatrice," I said. She walked in and flipped the light switch. The sudden brightness made me blink. She was still wearing that blue floral dress, but it looked rumpled now. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was loose around the edges. She was carrying her small, rolling suitcase and a plastic shopping bag. "Oh, Bernie, you scared me sitting there in the dark," she said, putting a hand to her chest. "Why are the lights off? Are you trying to save electricity again?" "I was just thinking, Beatrice, how is Atlanta?" She sighed a long, dramatic exhalation of breath and dropped her bags on the floor. "Oh, it was exhausting, Bernie. Truly exhausting. The seminars went from dawn until dusk. Sister Margaret talks so much, you know how she is. And the hotel bed was hard as a rock. My back is killing me." She walked over to me and leaned down to kiss my cheek. That was when it hit me. It was not the smell of the cheap soap from a budget hotel. It was not the smell of hymn books or church coffee. It was a sharp, musky scent. Expensive men is cologne. It was cedar and sandalwood and betrayal. It clung to her dress. It was in her hair. It was the smell of the man I had seen behind the glass at the bank. I held my breath so I would not gag. "Welcome home," I said. She straightened up and smiled. That smile used to warm me. Now it looked like a crack in a porcelain mask. "I brought you something," she said, reaching into the plastic bag. "I know you hate it when I spend money, but I saw this at the airport gift shop and thought of you." She pulled out a tie. It was polyester, bright red with little golf clubs on it. "I do not play golf. I have never played golf. I have bad knees, and I think it is a waste of good land. It is nice." "Beatrice," I said, taking the plastic package. "Thank you. I am going to take a shower," she said, stretching her arms. "I feel like I have been sitting in a conference room for 3 days straight. I need to wash the travel off me." She picked up her suitcase and headed for the bedroom. I waited. I counted the seconds in my head just like I used to count the curing time for concrete. 1, 2, 3. I heard the bedroom door close. I heard the bathroom door open. I heard the pipes groan as the shower turned on. 45 years of marriage means you know the rhythm of a person is life. Beatrice takes long showers. She likes the water scalding hot. She uses 3 different creams before she even dries off. I had 20 minutes, maybe 25. I stood up. My knees popped, but I ignored the pain. I moved with a speed I did not know I still possessed. I walked into the bedroom. The steam was already seeping from under the bathroom door. The noise of the water was loud, a white noise that covered the sound of my footsteps. Her suitcase was on the bed. She had not unzipped it yet. I approached it like it was a bomb. I did not want to leave traces. I knew Beatrice. She was meticulous. If I moved a shirt and did not put it back exactly right, she would know. I unzipped the main compartment slowly, keeping the noise down. Inside were her clothes, but they were not her church clothes. There were no modest skirts, no high-necked blouses. On top was a red silk dress, the kind of dress she wore 30 years ago when we went dancing. The kind of dress she told me was too revealing for a woman of God. Next to it was a swimsuit, a black one-piece with a plunging neckline. We live in a landlocked state. Atlanta is not on the ocean. I dug deeper, my hands shaking slightly. I had to be careful. I lifted the clothes gently, feeling for paper, feeling for truth. At the bottom of the bag, tucked inside a pair of walking shoes, I found a small velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside were heavy clay chips, poker chips. I held one up to the dim light of the bedside lamp. It had the logo of a high-end casino. Not in Atlanta, in Las Vegas, the Flamingo. So that was the retreat. While I was eating ham sandwiches in the park, she was betting my pension on red or black. I dug again. I found a crumpled receipt in the side pocket of the bag. It was for room service. Champagne, caviar, 2 steak dinners. The total was over $400. But it was the name at the top of the receipt that made my blood run cold. Guest name Gavin Miller. Gavin, my son-in-law, the man who married my daughter Keisha, the man who called me Pops and made fun of my old truck. He was there. He was with her. Was he the man in the mask at the bank? No. Gavin is white. The imposter was black. But Gavin was the architect. He was the one paying for the room, or rather, he was using the money they were stealing from me to pay for the room. The water in the bathroom stopped. Panic flared in my chest. She was done early. I shoved the receipt back into the pocket. I put the poker chips back in the shoe. I folded the red dress and placed it exactly how I found it. I zipped the bag. I smoothed the bedspread. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, taking off my boots, when the bathroom door opened. Beatrice walked out, wrapped in a towel, steam billowing around her. She smelled of lavender soap now, but I could still smell the sandalwood in my memory. "Bernie," she said, surprised. "What are you doing in here?" "Just taking my boots off, Beatrice," I said, keeping my voice level. "My feet are swelling again." She looked at the suitcase. Then she looked at me. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Did you move my bag?" she asked. "I needed space to sit," I said. "I just pushed it over." She stared at me for a second longer. Then her face relaxed. "Oh. Well, do not just sit there staring at me. I need to get dressed. And Bernie, can you check the kitchen faucet? It is dripping again. It is driving me crazy." The faucet, the mundane honey-do list. She had just stolen $500,000 from me. She had been partying in Vegas with our son-in-law, and she was worried about a dripping faucet. It was a power move. It was her way of asserting that everything was normal, that I was still just the handyman in her world. "I will look at it," I said. I stood up and walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame. I needed to know one more thing. I needed to see how deep the rot went. By the way, Beatrice, I asked, not turning around, how is Pastor Jenkins? I know he has been battling that hip problem. Did he look okay at the conference? I felt the silence in the room. I could feel her calculating. Oh, you know Jenkins, she said lightly. He is a trooper. He was limping a little, but he gave a beautiful sermon on Sunday morning. He preached about the prodigal son. It brought tears to my eyes, Bernie. He asked about you, actually. He said he misses seeing you in the pews. I nodded slowly. That is good to hear. I am glad he is doing well. I walked out of the room and closed the door. I leaned against the hallway wall and closed my eyes. Pastor Jenkins died last Tuesday. His funeral was 3 days ago. I sent flowers. She was not in Atlanta. She was not at a church conference. She did not see Pastor Jenkins. She lied to my face with the ease of a sociopath. She used a dead man to cover her tracks. I walked into the kitchen. The faucet was indeed dripping. Drip, drip, drip. It was a rhythmic torture. I gripped the edge of the granite counter. This kitchen. I paid for this granite. I paid for the stainless steel appliances she wanted. I paid for the custom cabinets. I built this life for her brick by brick, check by check, and she was dismantling it behind my back, laughing at me while she did it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration, not a text message. A security alert. I pulled it out. The screen was glowing red. It was from the encrypted app I used for my offshore accounts, the accounts that Beatrice did not know about. The accounts that Gavin definitely did not know about, or so I thought. Alert. Multiple failed login attempts. I tapped the notification. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into something sharp and functional. Someone was trying to brute force my password. They had the username. They had the routing number. They just did not have the key. I scrolled down to the IP address of the intruder. I am an engineer, but I have also kept up with technology. I know how to trace a signal. The location pin dropped on the map. It was not a hotel in Vegas. It was not a hacker in Russia. It was not the bank. It was a house in the suburbs. A large colonial house with a 3-car garage and a manicured lawn. It was my daughter Keisha's house. The phone almost slipped from my fingers. Keisha, my little girl, the one I carried on my shoulders, the one I tutored in math every night so she could get into a good college, the one I walked down the aisle. Gavin was involved, I knew that. But I had hoped, I had prayed that he was doing it behind her back, that he was the wolf and she was the sheep. But you do not try to hack a Cayman Islands bank account from your home Wi-Fi unless you are part of the team, unless you are sitting there watching the screen waiting for the vault to open. Beatrice was the distraction. The imposter was the brute force, but Keisha was the brains. I looked at the dripping faucet. I reached out and tightened the handle. The dripping stopped. I realized then that I was entirely alone. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law. They were a pack of wolves, and I was the old wounded caribou they were circling. But they forgot one thing. Caribou have antlers, and when cornered they do not just run, they fight. I put the phone back in my pocket. I heard Beatrice humming in the bedroom. She was happy. She thought she had won. She thought the old engineer was just a confused old man fixing a leak. I walked to the back door and looked out at my backyard. I looked at the shed where I kept my tools. They wanted my money. They wanted my legacy. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, but it was not going to be gold. It was going to be iron. I needed to see them together. I needed to see the whole pack in one room. I walked back to the bedroom door. I knocked. Beatrice, I called out. Yes, Bernie. Don't cook tonight, I said. I want to go see Keisha. I miss my daughter. Let us go over there for dinner. There was a pause. Then the door opened. Beatrice was dressed in casual clothes, but she was wearing the diamond earrings I gave her for our 30th anniversary. That sounds lovely, Bernie, she said, smiling that fake porcelain smile. I am sure Gavin and Keisha would love to see us. She had no idea. She thought she was walking into a family dinner. She did not know she was walking into a trap. I smiled back. A structural engineer knows that the most dangerous cracks are the ones you cannot see until the whole building comes down. Let us go, I said. I am starving. The drive to my daughter Keisha's house was suffocating. Beatrice sat in the passenger seat of my truck, humming a gospel tune while clutching her purse like it contained the crown jewels. She was in a good mood. Why would she not be? She thought she had just pulled off the heist of the century. She thought she was $500,000 richer. She did not know she was sitting next to the man who was about to dismantle her entire world. We pulled into the driveway of the sprawling colonial in the suburbs. It was a house that screamed money but whispered debt. The lawn was too green. The pillars were too white. And parked right in the center of the driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a brand new Porsche Cayenne. It was black shiny and still had the dealer plates on it. I parked my rusted Ford pickup on the street because I knew Gavin hated oil stains on his precious pavers. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment listening to the metal cool. I was an engineer entering a condemned building. I had to step carefully. Beatrice was already out of the truck, walking up the path with a spring in her step. I followed slowly, dragging my left leg a little more than necessary, playing the part of the weary old man. The front door swung open before we even reached the porch. Gavin stood there holding a tumbler of amber liquid, probably expensive scotch. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. He looked me up and down, his blue eyes cold and assessing. "Well, look who it is," Gavin said, his voice dripping with false cheer. "Old Bessie actually made it all the way out here. I was worried we would have to come pick you up on the side of the highway." "Hello, Gavin," I said, keeping my face neutral. "The truck runs fine." He took a sip of his drink and smirked. "Did you need gas money, Pops? You know the market has been good to me. I can spot you at 20 if you are running on fumes." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. Pops. He knew I hated that. He knew I preferred Mr. Freeman or Bernie. He did it to belittle me. He did it to remind me that in his eyes, I was just the old black man who fixed things while he was the master of the universe. "I am fine, Gavin," I said. He gestured to the black SUV behind him with his glass. "What do you think of the new ride? Just picked her up this afternoon. The bonus came in early this quarter." "It is a nice car," I said. "It is German engineering," Gavin said, patting the hood. "Top of the line, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Not that you would know anything about speed driving that heap of yours." I looked at the car. I looked at the leather seats. I looked at the chrome rims. He bought this today. He bought this hours after Beatrice and the imposter walked out of the bank. He did not buy this with a bonus. He bought this with my pension. He bought this with the sweat off my back and the ache in my knees. "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat. Keisha appeared in the doorway. My daughter. She looked tired. Her makeup was heavy, trying to hide the lines of stress around her eyes. She was wearing a dress that looked new, too. "Hi, Daddy," she said, giving me a quick hug. She smelled like expensive perfume and fear. "Come inside. Dinner is almost ready." We walked into the house. It was cool inside, the air conditioning humming. We went into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the stuff Beatrice gave them for their wedding. There were crystal glasses and linen napkins. It looked like a celebration. And it was. They were celebrating my demise. We sat down. Gavin took the head of the table naturally. Beatrice sat to his right, Keisha to his left. They put me at the other end facing Gavin. The distance felt symbolic. Dinner was roast beef and potatoes. Heavy food, comfort food. Gavin poured wine for everyone except me. "I forgot you do not drink the good stuff, Pops," he said. "There is tap water in the pitcher." I poured myself a glass of water. My hand shook slightly. It was not an act. The rage was making my nerves vibrate like a tension wire in a storm. "So Bernie," Beatrice said, cutting into her meat. We were thinking. "Since I am back from my trip and seeing how tired you look, maybe we should discuss the future." "The future?" I asked. "Yes," Gavin chimed in. "You know, Pops, this house of yours, it is a lot of work. The roof, the yard, the maintenance. A man your age should be relaxing, not climbing ladders." I looked at him. "I built that house, Gavin. I laid the foundation myself. I know every beam and every joist. It is not work. It is my home." Keisha looked down at her plate. "Daddy, we just worry about you. We found this really nice community. It is called Shady Oaks. It is an assisted living facility. They have nurses on staff 24 hours a day. You would have your own room. You would not have to cook or clean. Assisted living." That was the polite word for a warehouse for the dying. "Shady Oaks," I said, testing the name. "Is that not the place over on 4th Street, the one next to the landfill?" "It is very affordable," Gavin said quickly, "and efficient. They take your social security check and handle everything. You would be safe there, Bernie. You are getting forgetful. We have noticed." "Forgetful? Like how you forgot to turn off the gas last week," Beatrice lied smoothly. "Or how you got lost going to the grocery store." I stared at my wife. I had never left the gas on in my life. I checked the stove 3 times every night. It was a habit from my engineering days. Safety protocols. I do not remember that I said, playing along. See, Gavin said, pointing his fork at me. That is exactly the problem. You do not remember. That is why you need professional care. We are just thinking of you, Pops. We want you to be comfortable in your final years. He took a bite of roast beef, chewing with his mouth open. He looked like a wolf tearing into a carcass. I looked around the table. Beatrice was nodding in agreement. Keisha was refusing to meet my eyes. Gavin was smirking. They had it all planned out. The nursing home, the sale of my house, the theft of my money. I was just a line item in their budget, a problem to be solved. I felt a wave of nausea. I reached for my water glass. I let my hand tremble violently. I let the glass slip from my fingers. It hit the edge of my plate. The plate tipped. The bowl of tomato soup I had not touched yet slid across the table. It launched off the edge and landed squarely in Gavin's lap. Red-hot soup soaked into his beige trousers. It splashed onto his expensive polo shirt. Gavin roared. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. "You stupid old fool," he shouted, brushing frantically at his crotch. "Look what you did. This is cashmere." "Oh my goodness," I stammered, acting confused. "I am so sorry. My hand, it just slipped." Gavin looked at me. His face was red, his eyes bulging. For a second, the mask slipped completely. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a hiss that only I could hear over Beatrice's gasping. "You useless nigger," he whispered. The word hung in the air between us. It was heavy and ugly and old. It was a word I had heard on construction sites in the 70s. A word I had heard from police officers. But hearing it from my son-in-law at my daughter's table hit me like a physical blow. He did not just think I was old. He did not just think I was in the way. He hated me. He hated what I was. He hated that he had to pretend to respect me. Gavin, Keisha cried out, running to him with a napkin. "Bernie, you need to be more careful," Beatrice scolded me, though she looked more worried about the rug than her husband's racism. I sat there, my hands resting on the table. I looked at Gavin. He was wiping the soup off his pants, muttering curses. I needed to get out of that room. I needed to get into his head. "I am so sorry," I said again, my voice shaking. "I will get a towel. I will clean it up." "No," Gavin snapped. "Just stay there. You have done enough damage." "I need to go to the bathroom anyway," I said, standing up slowly, holding onto the table for support. "I will get a towel from the linen closet." I shuffled out of the dining room. I heard them arguing behind me. Keisha was trying to calm Gavin down. Beatrice was complaining about the dry cleaning bill. I walked down the hall, but I did not go to the bathroom. I went to the study. Gavin is sanctuary. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and slipped inside. It smelled of leather and stale cigar smoke. The walls were lined with framed certificates that meant nothing. The desk was a massive piece of mahogany cluttered with papers. I moved quickly. The old man shuffle vanished. I was quiet. I was efficient. I scanned the desk. Invoices, betting slips, notices from a collection agency. He was drowning in debt. The new car was a facade. Everything was a facade. Then I saw it. Under a stack of racing forms, there was a large rolled-up document. I recognized the paper. It was a blueprint. I unrolled it. It was a survey map of my property, my house, the house I built with my own hands. But across the drawing, in thick red marker, someone had drawn lines, subdivision lines, and written in the margin in Gavin is spiky handwriting were the words, "Demolish structure, sell lots for cash, urgent." They were not going to sell my house. They were going to bulldoze it. They were going to tear down the walls where I raised my daughter. They were going to rip up the garden where I planted roses for Beatrice. They were going to erase my existence from the earth and sell the dirt to the highest bidder to pay off his gambling debts. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This was war. Total war. I rolled the blueprint back up and placed it exactly where I found it. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the small metal device I had brought with me. It was an old piece of tech, a listening device I had kept from a government contract job in the 90s. It was simple, rugged, and had a battery life of 3 months. It transmitted on a low frequency that modern sweepers usually missed. I knelt down beside the desk. I ignored the pain in my knees. I felt under the wood, finding the support beam. I pressed the device against the wood. The magnet clicked softly. It was hidden deep in the shadows where no one would ever look. I stood up. I smoothed my flannel shirt. I had ears in the enemy's bunker now. I walked back into the hallway. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom just for show. When I returned to the dining room, Gavin had changed his pants. He was sitting at the table drinking straight from the scotch bottle. I found a towel, I said, holding it up. Sit down, Pops, Gavin grunted, not looking at me. And try not to break anything else. I sat down. I looked at my family, my wife who lied about God, my daughter who married a racist, my son-in-law who wanted to demolish my life. I took a sip of water. It tasted sweet. The game had changed. They thought they were dealing with a senile old man who spilled his soup. They did not know they had just invited a demolition expert into the foundation of their lives. And I had just planted the first charge. The private investigator I hired was a man named Miller. He was expensive, discreet, and worth every penny. 2 days after the dinner at my daughter's house, my phone buzzed with an encrypted file transfer. I sat in the cab of my truck parked 3 blocks away from a dive bar in the worst part of the city. The rain was hammering against the metal roof, a rhythmic drumming that helped me think. I opened the file. The first thing I saw was my own face staring back at me. For a second, I felt a jolt of genuine disorientation. The man in the photograph had my jawline. He had my high forehead. He even had the same weary set to his shoulders. But the eyes were different. My eyes are clear, sharp, and always calculating load-bearing capacities. This man's eyes were bloodshot, watery, and hollow. His name was Cyrus Washington. According to the dossier Miller had compiled, Cyrus was a 55-year-old former stage actor who had fallen off the edge of the world about a decade ago. Alcohol had taken his career, his family, and his dignity. He had been living in a shelter downtown until 3 weeks ago. That was when Gavin found him. I scrolled through the timeline. Gavin had not stumbled upon Cyrus by accident. My son-in-law had been scouting. He had visited casting agencies looking for older black actors. When that failed, he went to the streets. He found a man who was desperate enough to do anything for a bottle and a warm bed. The report detailed the transformation. Gavin had put Cyrus in a motel on the outskirts of town. He had paid for a barber to cut his hair exactly like mine. He had bought him the gray suit. He had spent hours coaching him on my mannerisms, my limp, the way I hold a pen. It was a production, a play written by my family where the final act was my destruction. I looked at the photos of Cyrus entering the motel. He was carrying a bottle of cheap vodka in a brown paper bag. This was the man who had walked into my bank and stolen my pension. This was the man Beatrice had held hands with. I felt a surge of pity, but I crushed it instantly like a bug under a boot. Pity is a structural weakness. It causes cracks. I needed to be made of steel. I checked the time. It was 11 at night. Miller's report said Cyrus spent his evenings at a bar called the Rusty Anchor. It was a place where people went to forget their names. I started the truck. I was not going to send the police. I was not going to send a lawyer. I was going to send myself. I parked in the alley behind the bar. It smelled of rotting garbage and stale beer. The darkness was thick, heavy, and cold. I turned off the engine and waited. I knew how to wait. Construction is 90% waiting and 10% action. You wait for the permits. You wait for the inspectors. You wait for the concrete to cure. Around midnight, the back door of the bar swung open. A figure stumbled out, coughing violently. It was like watching a ghost. Under the dim yellow light of the security bulb, he looked exactly like me. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie now, but the resemblance was terrifying. Cyrus leaned against the brick wall, trying to light a cigarette with shaking hands. I stepped out of the truck. I closed the door softly, but in the silence of the alley, it sounded like a gunshot. Cyrus jerked his head up. He squinted into the shadows. "Who is there?" he slurred. I stepped into the light. Cyrus froze. The cigarette fell from his lips. His eyes went wide, and for a moment I thought he might have a heart attack right there. He looked from me to his own hands, then back at me. It must have been like looking in a mirror that judges you. "You," he whispered. "You are him." I walked toward him. I did not rush. I walked with the steady, heavy gait of a man who has carried steel beams on his shoulders. "Hello, Cyrus," I said. Panic took over. He pushed himself off the wall. He was younger than me by 15 years, but the alcohol had rotted his muscles. He lunged at me. It was a clumsy, desperate swing, a wild haymaker aimed at my head. He expected an old man. He expected a victim. He did not know that for 40 years I worked on construction sites. I have broken up fights between ironworkers who were high on adrenaline and rage. I have held up walls that were collapsing. I did not flinch. I stepped inside his guard. I caught his wrist in my right hand. My grip is not what it used to be, but it is still iron. I used his own momentum against him. I twisted his arm behind his back and shoved him forward. He slammed face first into the brick wall. I pressed my forearm against the back of his neck, pinning him there. "Ow, let me go," he wheezed. "Do not move, Cyrus," I said calmly into his ear, "or I will break this arm. And unlike you, I know exactly how much pressure it takes to snap the radius bone." He stopped struggling. He slumped against the wall, breathing hard, smelling of cheap gin and fear. "Are you going to kill me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Gavin said you were weak. He said you were senile." "Gavin is a liar," I said, "and you are a fool for believing him." I released the pressure on his neck, but I kept his arm pinned. I spun him around and shoved him back against the truck. He rubbed his wrist, looking at me with terror. "I am not going to kill you, Cyrus. I am not going to call the police. Not yet." "Then what do you want?" "I want to hire you." He blinked, confused. The fight drained out of him, leaving him looking small and pathetic. "What?" "Gavin is paying you, right?" I asked. "How much?" 5,000. Maybe 10 if he is feeling generous with my money. 5,000, Cyrus muttered, looking at his shoes. "Half now, half when the job is done." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a thick envelope. It was heavy. Cash is heavy. "Inside this envelope is $10,000, I said. I held it out. Cyrus looked at the envelope like it was a holy relic. He reached for it, but I pulled it back. "This is a down payment," I said. "There is another 10 waiting for you when this is over. That is $20,000, Cyrus. 4 times what Gavin is paying you." He licked his lips. "What do I have to do?" "You keep the job," I said. "You keep being me. You keep answering Gavin's calls. You keep going to the meetings. You keep signing the papers." He frowned, trying to process this through the fog of alcohol. "You want me to help them steal from you?" "No," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "I want you to help them think they are stealing from me. But from this moment on, you do not work for Gavin, you work for me. When you are in a room with them, you are my eyes, you are my ears, and when the time comes, you will say exactly what I tell you to say. Do you understand?" He looked at the money. He looked at me. He saw a man who had just overpowered him without breaking a sweat. He saw a man who was offering him a lifeline. "I understand," he whispered. I handed him the envelope. He clutched it to his chest. "Good," I said. "Now tell me, what is the next step? What does Gavin have planned?" Cyrus looked around the alley nervously, as if Gavin might materialize out of the darkness. He tucked the envelope into his hoodie pocket. "Next Tuesday," he said, his voice shaking. "They are taking you to a clinic, not a hospital. A private clinic on the east side. Dr. Aris." I knew the name. Dr. Aris was a psychiatrist who had lost his license twice and gotten it back through legal loopholes. He was known for signing anything if the price was right. Why I asked, though, I already suspected the answer. "They want to certify you incompetent," Cyrus said. "They want a medical diagnosis, severe dementia, dangerous to yourself and others. That is why they need me. I have to go in there and act crazy. I have to fail the memory tests. I have to scream and throw things." I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. They were not just going to steal my money. They were going to steal my mind. They were going to put my name on a list of the broken and the lost. They were going to erase Bernard Freeman, the engineer, and replace him with a raving lunatic. "And the doctor," I asked, "does he know?" "He knows," Cyrus nodded. "Gavin met with him yesterday. He paid him cash, 10,000. The doctor is going to record the session. He is going to ask specific questions, and I am supposed to give the wrong answers. Then he signs the papers granting Gavin full guardianship, total control. They would have the power to sell my house, access my accounts, and lock me away in a facility until I died." This was the end game. I looked at Cyrus. He was shivering. "Okay," I said. "Next Tuesday. You will go. You will meet Dr. Aris." "And I act crazy?" he asked. "No," I said. A smile touched my lips, but there was no humor in it. "You are going to act sane. You are going to be the most lucid, intelligent, charming man Dr. Aris has ever met. You are going to recite poetry. You are going to do math problems in your head. You are going to talk about current events." "But Gavin will be furious," Cyrus said. "He will kill me. Gavin will not be in the room," I said. "That is against protocol. It will just be you and the doctor and the camera." I stepped closer to him. "And when the doctor asks you about your family, I want you to tell him the truth. I want you to look into that camera and tell him exactly what Gavin paid you to do." Cyrus' eyes widened. You want me to confess? On tape. I want you to destroy them, I said. And if you do this right, you walk away with $20,000 and a clean slate. If you try to double-cross me, Cyrus, I promise you I will find you. And next time I will not be offering cash. He nodded, swallowing hard. I believe you, Mr. Freeman. I turned to leave. I had what I needed. I had the timeline, I had the method, and I had the weapon. One more thing, Cyrus called out. I stopped and looked back. Beatrice, he said. She does not look at me when we are together. She looks through me. She hates you, you know. She really hates you. She told Gavin she wishes you would just die so she would not have to go through the trouble of pretending anymore. The words hit me in the center of my chest. My wife. The woman I built a life with. She did not just want my money, she wanted my erasure. Thank you, Cyrus, I said. That is good to know. I got back into my truck. I sat there for a moment watching Cyrus disappear back into the bar. They wanted a show. They wanted a performance. I was going to give them the greatest show of their lives. I drove out of the alley. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet. Next Tuesday. The clinic. That was where the trap would spring. But I still had a few days. And I had a daughter to deal with, Keisha. The one who tried to hack my accounts. The one who let her husband call me a slur at her dinner table. I was going to cut the rot out of my family tree branch by branch. And I was going to start with the roots. Tuesday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I woke up before the alarm just like I had for 40 years of construction work, but today I did not put on my work boots. Beatrice had laid out my clothes the night before. Sweatpants, a loose t-shirt, Velcro shoes. It was the uniform of the invalid. The uniform of a man who could no longer handle buttons or laces. She wanted me to look the part. I put them on. The fabric felt like surrender against my skin, but I reminded myself that camouflage is not surrender, it is strategy. Gavin was waiting in the kitchen. He was tapping his foot against the tile, checking his expensive watch. He looked impatient, like a man waiting for a slow elevator. Ready for your checkup, Pops? He asked without looking up from his phone. I do not feel sick, Gavin, I said, letting my voice quaver just a little. Why are we going to the doctor? It is just a routine assessment, Bernie Beatrice said, coming up behind me and patting my shoulder. Her touch was light, cold, and detached. Just to make sure your mind is as sharp as a tack. We are worried about your memory lapses. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had shared my bed and my life. There was no warmth in her eyes, only calculation. She was looking at me like I was a piece of furniture she wanted to sell but had to refurbish first. We got into Gavin's new SUV. The leather still smelled new. I sat in the back. They put the child lock on. I heard the click. I was a prisoner in a luxury cage. We did not drive to the university hospital where I had my hip surgery. We did not go to the medical center downtown. We drove east, past the factories, past the warehouses, into a neighborhood where the streetlights were broken and the windows had bars. The clinic was a single-story brick building with a sign that had peeling letters. Private Wellness Center. It looked less like a medical facility and more like a place where you went to pay off a gambling debt or sell a kidney. This does not look like Dr. Sterling's office, I said, gripping the door handle. Dr. Sterling is old school, Gavin said, parking the car. Dr. Aris is a specialist. He understands cases like yours. Complex cases. We walked in. The waiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed a low, angry buzz that grated on my nerves. There were no other patients. Just an empty receptionist desk and a door marked private. Dr. Aris opened the door. He was a small man with nervous eyes and a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly. He did not look at me. He looked at Gavin. Is this the patient? He asked. This is him, Gavin said. He has been having episodes, doctor. Forgetting names, getting lost, violent outbursts. I stood there silent. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I made myself smaller. Come in, Dr. Aris said, stepping aside. Let us get this over with. His office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, a camera on a tripod pointed directly at the patient chair. Sit down, Mr. Freeman, Dr. Aris commanded. I sat. The vinyl chair made a rude noise. Gavin stood in the corner. He pulled out his phone and held it up. I am just going to record this for the family records, Dr. Gavin said, so we can remember his baseline. Of course, Dr. Aris said. It was not for the family. It was for the judge. It was for the bank. It was evidence of my decline. Dr. Aris sat behind his desk. He opened a file folder. It was empty. He picked up a pen. "Mr. Freeman, do you know what year it is?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the camera lens. I looked at Gavin's smirk. I am an engineer. I know the date, the time, the barometric pressure, and the load-bearing capacity of the floor under my feet. I blinked slowly. "Is it 1990, I asked. Gavin let out a short, cruel laugh. 90, Dr. Aris repeated, making a show of writing it down. "And who is the President of the United States?" I paused. I looked around the room as if the answer was written on the walls. "Clinton," I whispered. Dr. Aris shook his head theatrically. Severe disorientation, he muttered loud enough for the camera to pick up. He held up a pen. "What is this object, Mr. Freeman?" "It is a stick," I said. Gavin snorted. "A stick. Did you hear that, Doc? He thinks a pen is a stick. He is gone. Completely gone." Dr. Aris leaned forward. "Mr. Freeman, do you know who these people are?" He pointed to Gavin and Beatrice. I looked at my wife. I looked at the man destroying my life. "That is the nice lady from the church," I said. "And that is the driver." Beatrice flinched. For a second I saw a flash of guilt or maybe just embarrassment, but Gavin beamed. It was exactly what he wanted. He wanted me erased. He wanted me to be a shell. Dr. Aris stood up. He walked around the desk and shined a light in my eyes. He did it roughly. "The cognitive decline is advanced," he declared to the room. "Based on this examination, Mr. Freeman lacks the capacity to make legal, financial, or medical decisions. He is a danger to himself. He requires 24-hour supervision and complete custodial management. He said it all in under 5 minutes. No MRI. No blood work, no history, just a script paid for with $10,000 of my own money." Gavin lowered his phone. "Is that enough, Doc?" "It is definitive," Dr. Aris said. "I have prepared the paperwork." He pulled a stack of documents from his drawer. They were already printed. They were already stamped. Power of attorney, guardianship, transfer of assets. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. The beam was under maximum stress. If I cracked now, everything would fall apart. If I refused to sign, they would force me. They would drag me to a real institution, or worse, they would make me disappear. "You need to sign this," Bernie Beatrice said, stepping forward. She put a hand on my shoulder. "It is so we can help you, so we can pay your bills and make sure you are safe. You do not want to worry about money anymore, do you?" I looked at the papers. The black letters swam before my eyes. Not because I could not read them, but because I knew exactly what they meant. They meant the end of my freedom. They meant Gavin could sell my house. He could drain my accounts. He could put me in a home and throw away the key. "I do not want to sign," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You have to sign." "Pops," Gavin said, stepping out of the corner. His voice dropped the fake cheer. It was hard and threatening. "Sign the damn papers or we leave you here. And Dr. Aris has a very special room in the basement for patients who do not cooperate." I looked at Dr. Aris. He smirked. "Just sign it, old man," he said. "It is just a formality." I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I let the pen rattle against the desk. "I cannot hold it," I whined. "Help him," Gavin ordered Beatrice. Beatrice wrapped her hand around mine. Her skin was warm, but her grip was like a vice. She guided my hand to the signature line. "Right here, Bernie. Just write your name, like you used to." I took a deep breath. I focused. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed since the day I was born. I drafted blueprints with my right hand. I signed checks with my right hand. I held my daughter with my right arm. But today in this room, I let my right hand go limp. I switched the pen to my left hand. "What are you doing?" Gavin asked sharply. "It hurts," I mumbled. "My arm hurts. Just let him sign." Beatrice hissed. "Who cares which hand he uses? He is senile." I gripped the pen in my left hand. It felt awkward, clunky. Perfect. I pressed the tip to the paper. I wrote Bernard Freeman. The letters were jagged. They slanted the wrong way. It looked like the signature of a child or a broken man. I signed the power of attorney. I signed the guardianship papers. I signed the asset transfer. With every signature, Gavin's smile got wider. He was practically vibrating with greed. He saw millions of dollars flowing into his pockets. He saw the gambling debts vanishing. He saw the sports cars and the high life. He did not see the trap. "Good job, Pops," Gavin said, snatching the papers away the moment the ink was dry. "See, that was not so hard, was it?" He handed an envelope to Dr. Aris. Thick. Cash. Pleasure doing business with you, Dr. Eris said, pocketing the money without counting it. We walked out of the clinic. The sun was shining, but to them the world looked like gold. To me it looked like justice. They helped me into the car. Gavin drove fast, reckless with joy. Beatrice hummed along to the radio. They talked about dinner. They talked about a vacation. They talked about me as if I was already dead. I sat in the back and watched the city roll by. They did not know about Evelyn Sterling. Evelyn was my lawyer. She was the daughter of the man who taught me engineering. She was sharp, ruthless, and loyal. 10 years ago, when I set up my estate, I sat in her office and we created a fail-safe. It is called a duress signature. We registered it with the courts. We notarized it. It is in my living will. The clause states clearly, any document signed by Bernard Freeman with his left hand is null and void immediately. Such a signature indicates that the signer is under extreme duress, coercion, or threat of harm. It is to be treated not as consent, but as a cry for help and evidence of a crime. I looked at my left hand resting on my knee. It was stained with a little bit of ink. That ink was not a contract. It was a death warrant for their freedom. Gavin laughed at something Beatrice said. Laugh while you can, son, I thought. You just handed the prosecutors a signed confession. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same, but everything had changed. I was no longer the victim. I was the witness. And the evidence was drying in Gavin's briefcase right now. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I needed my strength. The demolition had begun, but the explosion was yet to come, and I wanted a front row seat when the walls came tumbling down. I sat in the cab of my rusted Ford pickup parked 3 streets away from my daughter Keisha's house. The rain had started again, a slow gray drizzle that matched the static hissing in my earbuds. I was listening to the audio from the bug I had planted under Gavin's mahogany desk. I had been listening for hours. I heard Gavin making calls to bookies. I heard him threatening someone named Rico about an extension on a loan. That was expected. Gavin was a gambler and a fraud. I knew the load-bearing walls of his character were made of paper mache. But then I heard the door to his study open. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. Daddy is holding on to that money like it is the last drop of water in the desert. The voice was clear, sharp, and impatient. It was Keisha. My heart stuttered. I pressed the headphones tighter against my ears, praying I had misheard. I prayed she was defending me. I prayed she was telling her husband to back off. Instead, I heard the sound of ice dropping into a glass. He is senile. Keisha continued, her voice dripping with disdain. He sits on that porch, staring at nothing while we drown. Does he not understand that we have needs? Does he not understand that I cannot go to prison, Gavin? Prison. I sat up straighter. The leather of my truck seat creaked. Baby, calm down, Gavin said, his voice soothing. I took care of it. The witness has been paid. The police report has been lost. It cost us $20,000, but it is handled. $20,000, Keisha snapped. That was the money for the country club membership. That was supposed to be for Leo's tuition next semester. It was necessary, Gavin said. Unless you want to trade your Chanel bag for an orange jumpsuit. You were drunk, Keisha. You hit that girl and you drove away. If I had not stepped in with your mother as cash, you would be facing a felony hit and run. I stopped breathing. The air in the truck felt suddenly thin. My daughter. My little girl who I taught to ride a bike, who I taught to look both ways before crossing the street. She had hit someone. She had been drunk. And instead of stopping, instead of helping, she had fled. She had left a human being bleeding on the pavement to save her own skin. And the money. The cash Beatrice had stolen from the bank, the cash I had let them take. It was not for an investment. It was not for a vacation. It was blood money. It was a bribe to cover up a crime. I heard Keisha sigh on the recording. I know. But we need more liquid assets, Gavin. If that witness comes back for more money, or if the cops start asking questions about the car repairs, we need reserves. We need Daddy as accounts. We need to sell the house. You have to push the doctor. Make sure he signs those papers on Tuesday. We already did that, Gavin said. He signed. Pops did his part perfectly. He drooled and scribbled like a toddler. We own him, Keisha. Good, she said. God, he is so pathetic. He is just a useless old man taking up space. I just wish he would hurry up and die so we could stop pretending. I ripped the earbuds out of my ears. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped them on the floorboard. Pathetic. Useless. Taking up space. I leaned my head against the steering wheel. I did not cry. Engineers do not cry when a structure fails. We analyze the failure. we find the point of collapse. I had spent my life thinking Keisha was the victim. I thought she was the soft wood caught in the vice grip of Gavin's steel ambition. I thought he had corrupted her. But wood does not rot because of the steel. Wood rots because it is untreated, because it is weak. Keisha was not a victim. She was the architect. I started the truck. I needed to verify the data. I needed to see the cracks with my own eyes. I drove to the police precinct in the district where Gavin and Keisha lived. I did not go inside. I went to the impound lot around the back. I have a friend there, an old mechanic named Sal, who used to work on the city fleet when I was consulting for the Department of Public Works. Sal let me in. He did not ask questions. He owes me a favor from 1998 involving a zoning permit for his garage. I walked through the rows of mangled cars. I was looking for a silver Mercedes. Keisha's car. Gavin had said it was in the shop for routine maintenance last week. I found it in the back corner covered by a blue tarp. It was not there for maintenance. I lifted the tarp. The front passenger side was crushed. The headlight was shattered. The hood was crumpled like a piece of tin foil. But it was the grille that told the story. There were dark stains on the chrome, dried blood, and caught in the jagged metal of the bumper was a scrap of fabric, blue denim. I took a picture with my phone. My hand was steady now. The grief had been replaced by a cold, mechanical precision. I asked Sal about the accident report. He checked the computer. "It is weird, Bernie," he said, frowning at the screen. "The log says this car came in 3 days ago involved in a collision with a stationary object, a telephone pole. But looking at that damage, that is no telephone pole, and there is no police report filed, just a tow order signed by a private contractor. Gavin had erased the crime. He had turned a hit and run into a fender bender. He had used my money to buy the silence of the tow truck driver, the police clerk, and probably the victim or their family." I thanked Sal and left. I drove to the intersection of State and Main, the location mentioned on the tow slip. I parked and got out. I walked to the crosswalk. I looked at the asphalt. I saw the faint black streaks of skid marks. I saw the shattered glass swept into the gutter. I closed my eyes and I could see it. Keisha drunk behind the wheel, the impact, the panic, the decision to run. It was a moral failure so profound it made the theft of my money look like a petty misdemeanor. I got back in my truck and drove to the private elementary school where my grandson Leo attended kindergarten. It was pickup time. I parked across the street. I watched the line of luxury SUVs idling at the curb. Keisha pulled up in Gavin's new black Porsche, the one bought with my pension. She looked immaculate. Her hair was perfect. Her sunglasses were oversized. She looked like a woman without a care in the world. The bell rang and the children poured out. I saw Leo. He was 5 years old with my eyes and my smile. He ran to the car. Keisha got out. She squatted down and opened her arms. Leo ran into them. She hugged him tight. She kissed his cheek. She smoothed his hair. She looked like the perfect mother, the loving protector. I watched them through the windshield and I felt a pain in my chest so sharp I thought I might be having a heart attack. She was hugging her son with the same arms that had steered a weapon into a stranger and fled the scene. She was kissing his face with the same lips that had called her father a useless old man. She was poisoning him. Not with chemicals, but with character. She was teaching him that money solves everything. She was teaching him that people are disposable. She was teaching him that the truth is whatever you pay for it to be. If I let this continue, Leo would become just like them. He would become a man who destroys things. I realized then what I had to do. It was the hardest calculation I had ever made. To save the building, I had to condemn the wing. To save the tree, I had to cut the root. To save my grandson, I had to destroy his mother. I could not just put Gavin in jail. If Gavin went down, Keisha would play the victim. She would claim she was abused. She was forced. She knew nothing. She would keep custody of Leo. She would keep spending my money. She would find another Gavin. No, I had to expose her. I had to strip her of her protection, her money, and her lies. I watched Keisha buckle Leo into the car seat. She laughed at something he said. It was a beautiful scene. It was a lie. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I did not go back to the hotel. I drove to a quiet park overlooking the city. I sat there watching the sun go down, turning the skyline into a silhouette of jagged teeth. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in years. Evelyn Sterling, my lawyer. The daughter of the man who taught me everything I know about engineering. She was the shark I kept in the tank for emergencies. Bernie, she answered on the first ring. I heard you were having some family trouble. News travels fast, Evelyn, I said. In our circles it does. What do you need? I watched the city lights flicker on one by one. I need you to initiate Operation Root Canal, I said. There was a pause. Evelyn knew what that code meant. We had drafted it 5 years ago as a doomsday scenario. It meant total disinheritance. It meant forensic audits. It meant criminal referrals. Are you sure, Bernie? She asked, her voice soft. That is your daughter. That is your only child. I looked at the photo of the blood-stained Mercedes on my phone. I do not have a daughter anymore, Evelyn. I said, my voice cracking for the first time. I have a defendant. Do it. Cut her off. Remove her from the will. Freeze the trust fund. And Evelyn, send the file on the car accident to the district attorney, not the police. The DA directly. I want her indicted before she even knows the ground is shaking. Understood, Bernie, Evelyn said. It will be done by morning. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark cab of my truck. I was an old man alone on a hill plotting the destruction of his own bloodline, but I was also an engineer. And when you see a structure that is rotted through, you do not paint it. You do not patch it. You bring it down before it falls on someone innocent. I started the engine. The demolition was entering its final phase, and I was the wrecking ball. I watched them walk into the International Trust Bank like they owned the pavement beneath their feet. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of gray, overcast day that makes the marble columns of a financial institution look like the gates of a mausoleum. I was parked across the street in my rusted Ford pickup watching the security feed on my tablet. I had access because I designed the redundancy systems for this building 15 years ago, and I knew exactly which port to tap into. Gavin led the pack. He was wearing a navy blue suit that cost $3,000 a suit bought with the initial withdrawal from my pension. He walked with a swagger that made my hands itch. Behind him was Beatrice clutching her designer handbag, her eyes darting nervously left and right. She knew this was the big one. This wasn't just skimming off the top. This was the main vein. This was the $5 million I had stashed in the Cayman Islands, the money they had discovered thanks to the spyware I let Cyrus plant on Gavin's computer. And trailing behind them like a well-trained dog was Cyrus. He was wearing my best Sunday suit. He had my limp down perfectly. He looked terrified, which was good. Fear makes a performance believable. They walked through the revolving doors. I switched the feed to the interior camera in the high net worth office. Henderson was waiting for them. He stood behind his mahogany desk, his face a mask of professional courtesy. But I knew his heart was racing. I had briefed him an hour ago. I told him exactly what was going to happen. I told him that the man walking into his office was an imposter, a hired actor, and that the man leading him was a criminal. Henderson wanted to call the FBI immediately. I told him no, not yet. We needed the transaction to go through. We needed the crime to be completed. Attempted fraud is one thing. Grand larceny and wire fraud on a federal level is a cage you never get out of. Good morning, Mr. Freeman, Henderson said, extending his hand to Cyrus. It is good to see you again. Cyrus shook his hand. His palm was likely sweating. Good to see you, Henderson, Cyrus mumbled, imitating my gravelly voice perfectly. Gavin stepped forward, placing his hands on the desk. He didn't shake hands. He just leaned in, imposing his presence. We are here to finalize the transfer we discussed, Gavin said. The offshore liquidation. We have the routing numbers for the crypto wallet right here. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It contained the address for a digital wallet, a wallet Gavin thought was untraceable, a wallet he thought was his ticket to freedom from the loan sharks circling his ankles. Henderson picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. Of course, Henderson said. $5 million. A substantial sum. We have received the digital authorization from your home IP address, but for a transfer of this magnitude, bank protocol requires a level 4 verification. Gavin frowned. What is level 4? We have the passwords. We have the dongle. We have the old man right here. It is a biometric voice analysis, Henderson explained calmly. We need Mr. Freeman to speak a specific passphrase into our security system. It analyzes pitch tone and cadence to ensure it is really him. It is a fail-safe against deepfakes and coercion. Gavin turned to Cyrus. His eyes were hard. Do it, he hissed. Just say the words. Cyrus looked at the microphone sitting on the desk. It was a small black device with a single red light. I sat in my truck holding my breath. This was the hinge point. This was where the load either held or the bridge collapsed. I had spent 2 nights teaching Cyrus the phrase, but I hadn't just taught him the words. I had taught him the code. The phrase was, "The river runs deep in the winter." If I said it, I would drop my voice on the word deep. That was the confirmation signal. But I had instructed Cyrus to raise his pitch slightly on the word winter. To the human ear, it sounded normal. To Gavin, it would just sound like an old man speaking. But to the bank's security algorithm, an algorithm I helped write, that upward inflection was a distress signal. It meant, I am speaking under duress. Do not execute the real transfer. Execute the simulation. Cyrus leaned into the mic. He licked his lips. He looked at Gavin, who gave him a subtle nod that was more of a threat than an encouragement. "The river runs deep in the winter," Cyrus said. His voice went up at the end, high and sharp on winter. I exhaled. He did it. The brave fool actually did it. Henderson looked at his computer screen. A blue bar flashed across the monitor. To anyone else, it looked like a loading bar. To Henderson, it was a silent alarm confirming that the honeypot protocol was active. "Thank you, Mr. Freeman," Henderson said, typing on his keyboard. "The voice print is a match." Gavin let out a breath he must have been holding since they walked in. He slapped Cyrus on the back hard enough to make the smaller man stumble. "See," Gavin crowed. "I told you he still has some lucid moments. Now move the money." Henderson stopped typing. He frowned at the screen. He tapped a few keys, then sighed. "I apologize," Henderson said. "The system is lagging. It seems the International Clearinghouse is doing a random compliance check on large transfers today. It might take a few minutes to get the green light." Gavin's smile vanished instantly. It was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated violence. "A check. What kind of check? This is his money. We authorized it. Why is there always a problem with you people?" "Gavin?" "Honey, calm down," Beatrice said, touching his arm. "It is just a few minutes." "Do not tell me to calm down," Beatrice Gavin shouted. His voice echoed off the soundproof walls. He slammed his hand onto the mahogany desk. The sound was like a gunshot. I watched on the monitor as Henderson flinched. This was exactly what we needed. We needed Gavin to lose control. We needed the cameras to capture the aggression, the instability, the threat. "We don't have a few minutes," Gavin yelled, leaning over the desk until he was inches from Henderson's face. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do? I manage millions of dollars. I am not some street hustler you can stall. Push the button. Push it now." "Sir, I need you to step back," Henderson said, his voice steady, but his hand hovering near the silent alarm button under his desk. Gavin spun around. He looked at Cyrus, who was cowering in the chair. "It is your fault, you useless old relic," Gavin screamed at the man he thought was me. "You probably messed up the voice thing. You can't do anything right. You built this fortune, and now you are too stupid to even help us spend it." He grabbed Cyrus by the lapels of my suit. He shook him. "Tell him to push the button. Tell him, or I will put you in a home so fast your head will spin." Beatrice stood up, terrified. "Gavin, stop! You are hurting him." "Shut up!" Gavin roared, shoving Cyrus back into the chair. "I am the only one thinking clearly here. We need this liquidity." Now I watched the feed with a cold satisfaction. There it was. The mask was gone. The sophisticated investor, the loving son-in-law, was gone. This was the real Gavin, a desperate, violent thug cornered by his own greed. The camera in the corner of the office was recording in 4K resolution. It was capturing every spittle of rage, every threat, every act of physical intimidation against a senior citizen. This footage wouldn't just get him arrested, it would ensure he never worked in finance again. It would ensure he lost custody of my grandson. It was the nail in his coffin. Henderson cleared his throat loudly. "Sir, the system just cleared," he said. Gavin froze. He smoothed his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain his composure, but his eyes were still wild. "Good," he panted. "That is good. Do it." Henderson hit the enter key. "Transfer initiated," Henderson said. $5 million is moving to the wallet address ending in X94. Due to the size of the transaction and the blockchain verification protocols, the funds will appear in your account in exactly 48 hours. 48 hours, Gavin asked. "Why can't it be instant?" "It is instant on our end." Henderson lied smoothly. "But the receiving wallet has a holding period for sums over 1 million. It is standard anti-money laundering procedure. There is nothing I can do to speed it up." Gavin stared at the screen. He saw the words "transfer successful," "pending." He didn't know that the transfer was a digital ghost. He didn't know that the money was moving from a dummy account I had created yesterday into a simulation sandbox monitored by the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. He didn't know that the moment he tried to access those funds in 48 hours, he would trigger a geolocation beacon that would lead the feds right to his laptop. But in that moment, Gavin didn't care about the weight. He only saw the word successful. He let out a laugh that sounded maniacal. He grabbed Beatrice and hugged her, lifting her off her feet. "We did it!" he shouted. "We are rich B! We are free!" Beatrice laughed too, but her eyes were still fearful, looking at Henderson, looking at Cyrus. She knew they had crossed a line. She knew there was no going back. Gavin turned to Henderson. 48 hours, he said, pointing a finger. "If that money isn't there in 48 hours, I will come back here and I will burn this place to the ground." "Do you understand me?" "I understand perfectly," Sir Henderson said. Gavin grabbed Cyrus by the arm, pulling him up roughly. "Come on, Pops," he said. "Let's get you a drink. You earned your keep today, even if you are a stuttering old fool." They walked out of the office. Gavin was practically skipping. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He had no idea he had just bought a ticket to federal prison. I watched them leave the building. I watched them get into Gavin's car. I picked up my phone and called Henderson. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I am fine," Bernie Henderson said, though I could hear the tremor in his voice. "That man is a monster. I have never seen such rage. You did good, Henderson. Upload the footage to the secure server." And Henderson, "Yes, Bernie. Make sure the FBI gets a copy of that threat he made about burning the bank down. That counts as a terroristic threat. It adds 10 years to the sentence. Will do. Bernie, where is the money really?" "The money is safe, Henderson," I said, starting my truck. "It is sitting in a charitable trust for veterans. It moved this morning while they were yelling at you. You are a dangerous man, Bernie Freeman. I am just an engineer, Henderson. I fix broken things. And sometimes the only way to fix something is to demolish it completely." I hung up. I watched Gavin's car merge into traffic. He was heading home, probably to open a bottle of champagne. He had 48 hours of happiness left. 48 hours to dream about yachts and mansions. I was going to let him enjoy it. I wanted him to fly high. I wanted him to touch the sun, because the fall from that height is the only thing that would shatter him completely. I put the truck in gear. The bank job was done. The trap was set. Now it was time for the celebration. Gavin would throw a party. I knew he would. His ego demanded an audience, and I intended to be the guest of honor. The bass from the stereo vibrated through the floorboards like a jackhammer attacking concrete. I sat on a crate of canned peaches in the pantry, which Gavin had decided was the perfect holding cell for his father-in-law during the festivities. He had shoved me in here an hour ago with a bottle of water and a warning. "Stay quiet, old man," he had hissed. "I have important people coming, people who do not want to see a drooling relic." I could hear them through the door. The clinking of glasses, the roar of laughter, the thud of heavy footsteps. Gavin was celebrating the pending arrival of $5 million. He had ordered cases of champagne. He had hired a catering crew. He had turned my home, the sanctuary I built for my family, into a frat house for criminals. But the guests were not college kids. I had seen them arriving through the window before Gavin locked me away. They were men in suits that cost more than my truck but fit them like armor. They had hard eyes and scars they tried to hide under expensive watches. These were the investors Gavin had bragged about. The people he owed money to. The loan sharks. The bookies. The men who broke legs for a living. Gavin thought he was impressing them. He thought he was showing them that he was a player. A man with liquidity. A man who could pay his debts and still have enough left over to buy the bar. He did not realize he was just a gazelle prancing in front of a pride of lions. I looked at the pantry door. It was a solid oak door. I installed it myself in 1995. I knew the grain, I knew the weight, and most importantly, I knew the hinges were on the inside. Gavin was not an engineer. He saw a lock and thought it meant security. I saw a hinge and saw opportunity. I reached into my pocket. They had taken my phone, but they had not searched me. I pulled out my multi-tool. It was old, the steel worn smooth by years of use, but the flathead screwdriver was still sharp. I stood up. My knees popped, but the pain was distant. Adrenaline is a powerful anesthetic. I wedged the screwdriver under the pin of the top hinge. I tapped the handle with the heel of my palm. The pin popped up an inch. I pulled it out. The music outside was getting louder. A song with a heavy beat that rattled the jars of tomato sauce on the shelves. It was perfect cover. I moved to the bottom hinge. Tap, pull. The door was heavy. I gripped the edge, my fingers digging into the wood. I lifted it carefully, easing it out of the frame. I set it down against the shelves. I stepped out into the hallway. The house was crowded. People were spilling out of the living room into the kitchen. The air smelled of expensive perfume and marijuana smoke. No one looked at me. To them, I was just a shadow, an old man in comfortable clothes moving through the periphery. I did not go to the front door. I did not go to the kitchen. I went to the linen closet at the end of the hall. Inside, behind the stacks of towels Beatrice insisted on folding in a specific way, there was a panel. It looked like an access panel for plumbing. It was actually the entrance to a service chute I had built for wiring and HVAC maintenance. It dropped straight down into the basement. I squeezed through the opening. It was tight. I had to exhale to get my chest through. I grabbed the ladder rungs bolted to the studs. I climbed down into the darkness. The basement was cool and quiet. The thumping of the party was just a dull throb down here. This was my nerve center. When I renovated the house 10 years ago, I installed a smart home system, but I did not buy one off the shelf. I built my own. I wired every room. I connected every light, every thermostat, every speaker to a central server rack in the basement. Gavin and Beatrice thought the smart features were just for convenience. They liked telling the lights to dim or the music to play. They did not know that the system had a master override. I walked to the server rack. The green lights blinked in the darkness like the eyes of a faithful dog waiting for a command. I sat down at the terminal. I cracked my knuckles. Gavin wanted a party. I was going to give him a show. I pulled up the interface. I had access to everything. Lighting, climate control, audio, security cameras. I checked the camera feed from the living room. Gavin was standing on the coffee table. He was holding a magnum of champagne. He looked sweaty and manic. Beatrice was next to him, laughing too loud, her hand on the arm of a man who looked like he strangled people for fun. My friends Gavin shouted over the music. "Tonight we celebrate freedom. The funds are clearing. The future is ours." The mobsters raised their glasses, but they did not smile. They were waiting to get paid. I typed a command into the terminal. Protocol Haunted House. It was a script I had written years ago, mostly to entertain my grandson Leo on Halloween. But tonight it had a different purpose. First, I cut the music. Silence slammed into the room upstairs. People stopped talking. Gavin looked at the speakers confused. Then I killed the lights. The house plunged into darkness. A few people screamed. I heard glass breaking. I waited 5 seconds, just enough time for the panic to set in. Then I activated the strobes. The recessed lights in the ceiling began to flicker rapidly. On, off, on, off. It was disorienting. It created a stroboscopic effect that made movement look jerky and unnatural. Next, I dropped the temperature. I overrode the safety protocols on the HVAC system. I diverted all the coolant from the industrial compressor I installed for the wine cellar directly into the living room vents. The temperature plummeted. Within minutes, it would be 50 degrees in there. Gavin shouted, "What is going on? Who touched the lights?" I watched on the monitor as he stumbled off the table. Now for the finale. I accessed the audio files. Specifically, the recordings from the bug I had planted in Gavin's study. The recordings of him and Beatrice plotting. The recordings of their greed. I selected a clip. I routed it to every speaker in the house. The living room, the kitchen, the patio, even the bathrooms. I turned the volume to maximum. Gavin's voice boomed through the house, distorted and loud like the voice of God. "I cannot wait until that old man is dead." The guests froze. The flickering lights illuminated their shocked faces. Beatrice's voice answered him shrill and clear. "Just be patient. Gavin, once the money clears, we can dump him in the state facility. He will be gone in 6 months. No one will care." Gavin looked around wildly. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Who is doing that?" I queued up the next clip. "We get the 5 million and we run Beatrice." This was Gavin's voice again. "I already booked the flights to Mexico. Those stupid creditors will not get a dime. Rico and his crew can chase us, but they will never find us. We will be on a beach sipping margaritas while they are looking for a ghost." The effect was instantaneous. The men in the expensive suits, the ones Gavin called his partners, stopped drinking. They put their glasses down. Rico. That was the name of the man standing near the fireplace. The man with the scar over his eye. Rico looked at Gavin. The The strobe lights made his face look like a demon mask. Gavin was trembling. "No, no, that is not real," he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is a deepfake. Someone is pranking me." I watched Rico walk toward Gavin. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "You are going to Mexico?" Rico asked. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room clearer than the speakers. "No, Rico." "I swear," Gavin stammered, backing away until he hit the wall. "I am paying you. The money is coming." "You called us stupid," Rico said. "You said we would not get a dime." I played the clip again just to be helpful. "Those stupid creditors will not get a dime." Rico nodded slowly. He looked at his men. He jerked his head toward the door. "This party is over," he said. He did not attack Gavin. He did not break his legs. Not there. Not in front of witnesses. He just looked at him with eyes that promised a very short and very painful future. "We will be watching you," Gavin, Rico said. "You have 48 hours. If that money is not in my hand by Friday noon, you will wish you were the old man you are trying to kill." Rico and his crew walked out. The rest of the guests followed. No one wanted to be around a dead man walking. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty except for Gavin and Beatrice. I turned the lights back on to full brightness. I turned the temperature back to normal. I cut the audio. Silence returned to the house. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a tomb. Gavin slid down the wall and sat on the floor, his head in his hands. Beatrice was sobbing on the sofa. I stood up from the terminal. My work in the basement was done. It was time to go upstairs. It was time to reclaim my kingdom. I climbed the ladder. I squeezed back through the linen closet. I walked down the hall. I entered the living room. Gavin looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. "You," he whispered. "You did this." I straightened my back. I adjusted my collar. I did not look like a confused old man anymore. I looked like the man who built the foundation this house stood on. "Get out of my house," I said. Gavin stood up, shaky. "This is my house, old man. I have the papers." I took a step forward. "You have nothing, Gavin. The papers are void. The money is gone. And your friends just left." I pointed to the door. "Run, Gavin, while you still have legs to run with." He looked at me. He looked at the door. He realized he was alone. He realized the game was over. He grabbed Beatrice by the arm. "Come on," he said. "We are leaving." Beatrice looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. "Bernie, please." He made me do it. I looked at her. The woman who stole from me. The woman who wished me dead. "Go with him, Beatrice," I said. "You deserve each other." They ran. They ran out the front door, leaving the champagne spilling on the rug, leaving the food rotting on the tables. I walked to the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I was alone, in my house. It was a mess. It smelled of strangers. But it was mine again. I went to the kitchen. I found a broom. I started to sweep. I had cleared out the trash. Now it was time to clean up the mess. The silence in the living room was heavier than concrete. The mobsters had left, taking the air in the room with them. The remaining guests, a mix of Gavin's sycophants and Beatrice's church friends, who had been invited to witness their triumph, stood frozen like statues in a museum of bad decisions. They held their empty champagne glasses, unsure whether to run or stay for the second act. Gavin was still on the floor, hyperventilating. Beatrice was sobbing on the sofa, her mascara running down her face in black rivers of guilt. They looked broken. They looked defeated. But I was not done. The demolition was only halfway complete. The structure was unstable, but it needed one final push to bring it down to the ground. I adjusted my cufflinks in the darkness of the hallway. I had retrieved my tuxedo from the cedar closet in the basement storage room. It was a black, bespoke suit I had bought 20 years ago for an engineering awards gala. It still fit, maybe a little loose around the waist, but the shoulders were perfect. I tied the bow tie by touch, my fingers remembering the movements even in the dark. I smoothed the lapels. I stepped out of the shadows and into the center of the living room. The emergency lights I had triggered earlier cast long, dramatic shadows across the floor. I walked to the center of the Persian rug, the one Beatrice had bought with the first unauthorized withdrawal from my savings account. I stood there tall and straight. My limp was gone. My confusion was gone. The senile old man they had dragged to Dr. Aris's clinic had vanished, replaced by the man who had built bridges across raging rivers. A gasp went through the room. It started with Mrs. Higgins, the choir director, and spread like a ripple in a pond. Bernie, Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. Gavin looked up. His eyes were bloodshot wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. He scrambled to his feet, using the coffee table for support. He swayed slightly, the adrenaline and the alcohol warring for control of his system. "What are you doing?" he slurred. "Get back in the pantry, old man. You are ruining everything." I looked at him. I did not look at him with anger. I looked at him with the cold detachment of a building inspector condemning a structure that was no longer safe for habitation. "I am not the one who ruined things, Gavin," I said, my voice steady and resonant. "I am just the one turning on the lights so everyone can see the mess." Gavin's face twisted. The humiliation was too much for him. He had spent years building an image of success, of power of control, and in one night I had stripped it all away. I had exposed him as a fraud in front of his investors. I had exposed him as a coward in front of his wife. And now I was standing in his domain wearing a better suit than him, speaking with more authority than he had ever possessed. "You think this is funny?" Gavin screamed. "You think you can play games with me? This is my house. This is my money. You are nothing but a demented old relic." He lunged. It was a desperate, sloppy attack. He came at me with his hands reaching for my throat, his face contorted in a mask of pure hate. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the voice that was telling him the truth. The guests screamed. Beatrice shrieked my name. But I did not move. I did not flinch. I spent 40 years on construction sites. I have dealt with steel beams swinging in the wind. I have dealt with high-pressure hydraulic lines bursting. I learned a long time ago that force is irrelevant if you do not have balance. Gavin had no balance. He was top-heavy with rage. As he reached me, I simply stepped to the left. I pivoted on my heel. I caught his right wrist with my left hand, gripping it tight. I used his own momentum against him. I pulled him forward while simultaneously stepping behind his leg. It is simple physics. Lever and fulcrum. I swept his legs out from under him. Gavin hit the floor with a bone-rattling thud. The air left his lungs in a sharp wheeze. I did not let go of his arm. I twisted it behind his back, pinning him to the Persian rug with a pressure hold I learned from a security contractor back in the 90s. "Stay down, Gavin," I said calmly, leaning over him. "You are embarrassing yourself." He struggled, thrashing like a fish on a deck, but I applied just a fraction more pressure to his shoulder joint. He cried out in pain and went limp. Beatrice stood up from the sofa. Her face was pale, her hands clutching her pearls. "Bernie, stop!" she screamed. "You are hurting him. You are having an episode. Someone call the doctor. He is crazy. He has lost his mind." She looked around the room, desperate to spin the narrative. "Do not listen to him," she pleaded with the guests. "He has dementia. He gets violent. He does not know what he is doing." I looked at my wife. Even now, with her son-in-law pinned to the floor and her schemes exposed, she was still trying to sell the lie. She was still trying to paint me as the villain in her story. I released Gavin and stepped back. He groaned, clutching his shoulder, curling into a ball on the floor. I straightened my bow tie. "I am not crazy, Beatrice," I said, "and I am certainly not having an episode. But if you want to talk about doctors, let us talk about doctors." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control for the home entertainment system. I pointed it at the massive projection screen that rolled down from the ceiling on the far wall. Gavin had installed it to watch football games and track his imaginary stock portfolio. Tonight it was going to show something much more interesting. I pressed the power button. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright rectangle of light onto the screen. I had linked the system to my tablet earlier. I had the feed ready. Breaking news, the graphic on the screen read. It was a live feed from the local news station. A reporter was standing in front of a familiar brick building on the east side of town. The sign above the door read Private Wellness Center, but the sign was barely visible behind the flashing blue and red lights of police cruisers. I turned up the volume. "Federal agents and local police have raided the clinic of Dr. Aris late this evening," the reporter said, her voice grave. "Authorities say the raid is part of a massive investigation into medical fraud, elder abuse, and the falsification of legal documents." Beatrice gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The camera zoomed in. 2 officers were leading a man out of the building in handcuffs. He was trying to hide his face with his jacket, but there was no mistaking the small frame and the ill-fitting suit. It was Dr. Aris. "Dr. Aris has been taken into custody," the reporter continued. "Sources say the investigation was triggered by a whistleblower who provided audio and video evidence of the doctor accepting bribes to declare healthy seniors mentally incompetent." On the floor, Gavin stopped groaning. He stared up at the screen, his face draining of all color. Police are also executing search warrants for the records of all patients evaluated by Dr. Aris in the last 6 months, the reporter added. They are looking for co-conspirators. Family members who paid for these false diagnoses are expected to face charges of conspiracy and fraud. I paused the video. The image of Dr. Aris in handcuffs froze on the screen, looming over the room like a judgment. I turned back to the guests. They were silent. The shock was palpable. They looked from the screen to me, and then to Gavin and Beatrice. The pieces were falling into place. The sudden need for money, the rush to get power of attorney, the mysterious dementia that only seemed to happen when I was inconvenient. You see, Beatrice, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, I am not the one who is crazy. I am the whistleblower. Beatrice collapsed back onto the sofa. She looked small. She looked old. The facade of the pious churchwoman cracked and fell away, leaving only a frightened, greedy woman who had bet everything on the wrong horse. Gavin pulled himself up to a sitting position. He looked at the screen, then at me. You set us up, he whispered. You planned this. I did not plan for you to betray me, Gavin, I said. You did that on your own. I just planned the landing. I looked around the room at the guests, the partygoers, the hangers-on, the people who had come to drink my champagne and celebrate my demise. This party is over, I announced. My voice was not a shout. It was a statement of fact. This house is now a crime scene, I said. Everything in it, the computers, the documents, the safe in the study, is evidence in a federal investigation. The police are on their way. They will be here in 10 minutes to take statements. Panic rippled through the crowd. People began to grab their coats. Purses were snatched up. The herd mentality took over. No one wanted to be interviewed by the FBI. No one wanted to be associated with a family that drugged grandfathers and bribed doctors. If I were you, I continued, I would leave now. Unless you want to explain to the officers why you were celebrating with a man who just tried to defraud a senior citizen of $5 million. That was the trigger. The guests stampeded toward the door. There were no goodbyes, no thank yous. Just the sound of expensive heels clacking on the hardwood floor and the slam of car doors outside. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty. Only 4 of us remained. Me standing in the center of the room in my tuxedo. Gavin sitting on the floor nursing his shoulder. Beatrice weeping silently on the sofa. And Keisha, who had been standing in the corner the entire time, watching the destruction of her world with wide, terrified eyes. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't moved to help her husband. She hadn't moved to comfort her mother. She had just watched, calculating her own survival odds. I looked at them. My family. The room was a mess. Spilled drinks, overturned chairs, the remnants of a celebration that never happened. The air conditioner hummed. The projector fan whirred. I walked over to the wall and turned on the main lights. The bright, harsh glare illuminated every stain on the carpet, every tear in the fabric of our lives. Get up, Gavin, I said. He looked up at me. There was no fight left in him. The bully had been confronted. The predator had become the prey. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice raspy. I am not going to do anything, I said. I have already done it. The police are coming for you, Gavin. And this time there is no money to bribe them. There is no fake signature to save you. I looked at Beatrice. And you, I said, you should pack a bag, a small one. Because this house goes into foreclosure next week. Gavin leveraged it to the hilt to pay his gambling debts. He forged my signature on the deed 6 months ago. I let him do it because I knew the bank would verify it with me eventually. Beatrice looked at Gavin with horror. You sold the house, she whispered. I mortgaged it, Gavin muttered, looking down. I was going to pay it back. Once the old man died. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The night air rushed in cool and clean. It smelled of rain and wet asphalt. It smelled of truth. I stood by the door, a sentinel in black tie. Wait for the police outside, I said. I do not want you in my house when they arrive. They stood up slowly, broken people moving through the wreckage of their own greed. They walked past me. Gavin would not look me in the eye. Beatrice tried to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Keisha walked past with her head down, tears streaming down her face. I watched them walk down the driveway to the curb. They stood there under the street lamp, huddled together, not out of love, but out of fear. I closed the door. I locked it. I was alone. I walked back into the living room. I picked up a glass of champagne that had been left untouched on a side table. It was warm and flat. I raised it to the empty room. To structural integrity, I said to the silence. I drank it. It tasted like victory. Then I sat down in my recliner and waited for the sirens. They would be here soon. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to telling my side of the story. The sun rose over the suburbs like a cold white eye staring down at the wreckage of my family. I sat on the porch swing of the house I built with my own hands, drinking black coffee from a chipped mug. I had not slept, but I did not feel tired. I felt the strange vibrating alertness of a man watching a controlled demolition, waiting for the dust to settle so he can see what is left standing. In the driveway, Gavin's luxury SUV was parked haphazardly, half on the grass. They had slept in the car. Or rather, they had huddled in it. I could see the condensation on the windows. They had nowhere else to go. The locks were changed. The accounts were frozen. The friends had fled. At 8 in the morning, the silence of the neighborhood was broken not by bird song, but by the heavy rolling crunch of tires on asphalt. 2 police cruisers turned onto the street. They did not use their sirens. They did not flash their lights. They moved with the slow, predatory grace of sharks entering a feeding frenzy. Behind them was a black, unmarked sedan. That would be the detectives, or maybe the feds. The car doors in the driveway flew open. Gavin stumbled out. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair mashed on one side. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. When he saw the police, his face lit up with a desperate, manic hope. He thought they were here for me. He thought his lies about my dementia and violence had finally worked. He ran toward the officers, waving his arms. "Officers, thank God," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You have to help me. That man is dangerous. He assaulted me. He locked us out of our own home. He is having a psychotic break." I stayed on the porch. I took a sip of coffee. I watched. The officers got out of their cars. They adjusted their belts. They did not look at me. They looked at Gavin. One of them, a sergeant with gray hair and eyes like flint, stepped forward. "Are you Gavin Miller?" he asked. Yes, that is me," Gavin panted, pointing a shaking finger at the porch. "Arrest him. He is a menace." "Mr. Miller, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the sergeant said. Gavin froze. He blinked. "What? No, you do not understand. I am the victim here. I called you guys yesterday. Mr. Miller, you are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny," the sergeant recited. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously in the morning air. Gavin tried to back away. No, this is a mistake. That old man is lying. He is senile. We have a statement from a Mr. Cyrus Washington, the sergeant said, stepping into Gavin's personal space. "He turned himself in last night. He gave us the recordings, Mr. Miller. He gave us the cash you paid him. And he gave us the computer files you tried to delete." The color drained from Gavin's face, leaving him gray and pasty. Cyrus, the drunk actor, the loose end Gavin thought he had tied up. Gavin looked at the house. He looked at me. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. Checkmate, Gavin. The sergeant spun Gavin around and slammed him against the hood of the cruiser. The handcuffs ratcheted shut. It was the most beautiful sound I had heard in 40 years. Beatrice and Keisha scrambled out of the SUV. They stood on the lawn, shivering in the morning chill, clutching their coats around them. They looked at Gavin in cuffs, and then they looked at each other. The survival instinct kicked in. The pack mentality dissolved. It was every rat for itself. It was her, Gavin screamed as the officer shoved him toward the back seat. "It was all Keisha. She made me do it." Keisha gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. "She needed the money," Gavin shouted, spitting on the window of the cruiser. "She hit a girl with her car. She was drunk. She committed a felony, hit and run. I only stole the money to pay off the witness. I was protecting her." "Arrest her too." The officer paused. He looked at Keisha. "Is that true, Ma?" the officer asked. Keisha's face crumpled. She pointed a trembling finger at her husband. "He is lying," she shrieked. "He is a gambler. He owes hundreds of thousands to loan sharks. He forced me to go along with it. He said they would kill us if we did not get Daddy's money. He threatened me." I watched from the porch as my daughter threw her husband to the wolves. She did not deny the hit and run. She just tried to justify it. She tried to paint herself as the damsel in distress. "You liar," Gavin roared from the back seat, kicking the door. "You helped plan it. You tracked his accounts. You said you wished he was dead so we could sell the land." And Mom, Keisha yelled, turning on Beatrice. Mom was in on it from the start. She hated him. She said he was boring and cheap. She wanted the money for her trips and her boyfriend. The word hung in the air. Boyfriend. The officers looked at Beatrice. She stood there clutching her Bible that she had retrieved from the car. She looked small and frail and utterly exposed. "I did not do anything," Beatrice sobbed. "I just wanted my family to be happy. They manipulated me. I am an old woman. I did not understand what they were doing." "Tell that to the judge," the sergeant said. He motioned to another officer. "Take statements from both of them, and get a tow truck for that Mercedes. We need to run forensics on the bumper for a hit, and run investigation." Keisha screamed as the officer took her arm. Not in handcuffs, not yet. Not. But she was detained. Her life as a suburban princess was over. The police cars began to organize the scene. Neighbors were coming out onto their porches and bathrobes watching the spectacle. Mrs. Higgins from next door was filming with her phone. I stood up. My knees ached, but I walked down the steps. I walked past the police cars. I walked past Keisha, who could not look me in the eye. I stopped in front of Beatrice. She was standing by the mailbox, shaking. When she saw me, she threw herself at my feet. She wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face in my trousers. "Bernie, oh, Bernie," she wailed. "Thank God you are okay." I was so scared. I did not know what to do. "Get up, Beatrice," I said, my voice cold as liquid nitrogen. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Please, Bernie, you have to help me." I was a victim too. Gavin terrified me. He said he would hurt me if I did not help him get your signature. "I did it to protect you. I did it because I love you." I looked down at her. For a second, I saw the woman I married 40 years ago. The woman in the white dress. The woman who promised to love, cherish, and obey. But then I saw the woman who held hands with an imposter. The woman who went to Vegas while I sat at home. "I was seduced, Bernie," she whispered, her voice dropping low, trying to be intimate. "He tricked me. He made me think we needed the money for our future. I was weak, Bernie, but I never stopped loving you. Please, we can fix this. We can go back to how it was." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a manila envelope. It was not thick. It did not need to be. It contained only 5 photographs. I did not get these from the private investigator. I got these from a box I found in the attic 3 years ago. A box she thought was hidden behind the Christmas decorations. I had kept them. I had waited. Because I am a man who measures twice and cuts once, I opened the envelope. I pulled out the photos. I let them flutter down onto the grass in front of her. The first photo was dated 10 years ago. Beatrice at a motel with the choir director. The second was 7 years ago. Beatrice on a boat with the deacon. The third was 5 years ago. Beatrice at a restaurant holding hands with our neighbor, Mr. Johnson. The fourth was 2 years ago. Beatrice kissing a man I did not know in a park. And the fifth was from last week, a screenshot from a security camera at the casino in Vegas. Beatrice sitting on Gavin's lap, laughing while he threw chips on the table. She stared at the photos. Her weeping stopped instantly. Her face went slack. The mask did not just crack, it shattered into dust. "You were not seduced, Beatrice," I said. "And you were not tricked." I pointed to the photos scattered on the lawn like dead leaves. "You have been betraying me for a decade. You did not do this because Gavin scared you. You did it because you are bored. You did it because you are greedy. You did it because you have a hole in your soul that you tried to fill with other men and my money." She looked up at me. The fear was gone, replaced by a hard, cold hatred. "You kept these," she hissed. "You knew." "I knew," I said. "I stayed because of Keisha. I stayed because I took a vow. I stayed because I thought maybe if I worked harder, if I built more, if I gave more, you would remember who we were." I leaned down close to her face. "But you are not a victim, Beatrice. You are not a sheep who got lost. You are the snake in the garden. You are the venom that poisoned this family." I stood up. I signaled to the officer standing nearby. "Officer," I said, "I would like to press charges against my wife as well. She is a co-conspirator on the fraud accounts, and I believe you will find her fingerprints on the forged documents along with her boyfriend over there in the police car." Beatrice screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. She lunged for me, her nails aiming for my eyes. The officer caught her. He pulled her back. "You old bastard," she screamed as he handcuffed her. "I should have killed you myself. I should have put poison in your coffee years ago." The neighbors heard it. The police heard it. "There it is," I said quietly. "The truth. Finally." I turned my back on her. I turned my back on the screaming, on the sirens, on the wreckage of my life. I walked back up the path to my house, my empty, quiet house. I sat back down on the swing. I picked up my coffee. It was cold now. I poured it into the flower bed. I needed a fresh cup. I needed a fresh start. I watched the police cars drive away one by one, taking the trash out of my life. I was 70 years old. I was alone. I had lost my wife, my daughter, and my illusions. But as I looked at the sun rising higher over the trees, I realized something else. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation beneath my feet felt solid. The phone rang on the table in the visiting room. It was not a normal phone. It was bolted to the stainless steel divider separating the free from the caged. I sat down and picked up the receiver. On the other side of the glass, Gavin sat in an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He looked gaunt. His hair, once styled with expensive product, was greasy and flat. He had a bruise on his cheek, likely a welcome gift from his new neighbors. But his eyes were still arrogant. He picked up his phone and leaned in close to the glass, a smirk twisting his lips. "You came," he said, his voice tinny through the receiver. "I knew you would come. You wanted to gloat, didn't you, old man?" "I did not come to gloat, Gavin," I said calmly. "I came to close the file." "Close the file?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You think this is over. You think putting me in here ends it. You are wrong, Pops. I won." "You won?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You are in federal prison facing 20 years for fraud. Your wife is indicted. Your mother-in-law is in the cell next to the laundry room. How exactly is that winning?" Gavin leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. "Because I have the money," he whispered. "The $5 million. It cleared this morning. I checked it on the commissary computer. It is in my crypto wallet. Safe. Untraceable." He sat back, looking smug. "Even if I do 10 years, I will come out a rich man. I will be on a beach in Belize while you are rotting in the ground, and there is nothing you can do about it. You cannot freeze crypto. You cannot seize it. It is mine." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me slurs, who had tried to drug me, who had planned to kill me. And I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hate. Just the satisfaction of a mathematician solving the final variable in an equation. "Gavin," I said, my voice soft. "Do you know what a honeypot is?" His smirk faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" "A honeypot," I explained, "is a trap used in cybersecurity. It looks like a valuable server or a database full of money. It is designed to attract hackers, to lure them in." So what? Gavin sneered. "So I continued the wallet address you sent to Henderson, the one you thought was secure. I created it." Gavin froze. "No, that is impossible. I generated that key myself." "You generated it on your laptop," I said. "The laptop that Cyrus infected with my spyware 3 weeks ago. I watched you generate it, and then I swapped the destination address in the code." Gavin shook his head slowly, his eyes widening. No, you are lying. I saw the balance. 5 million. You saw a simulation, Gavin," I said. "You saw a mirror image I created to keep you happy, to keep you confident, to keep you from running before the police arrived." I leaned forward, mirroring his posture. "There is no $5 million in that wallet, Gavin. There never was. The money from my offshore account went to a charitable trust for veterans yesterday morning. The only thing in your wallet is a tracking beacon that the FBI is currently analyzing to find every other illegal transaction you have ever made." Gavin began to hyperventilate. He clawed at his collar. No, that cannot be true. I have the key." "But that is not the best part," I said. "You see, when you logged into that wallet this morning using the prison computer, you triggered a second protocol, a reverse extraction script." What does that mean?" he stammered. "It means," I continued, enjoying the dawning horror on his face, "that the script did not just show you a fake balance. It used your credentials to access your other connected wallets, the ones you keep your real money in, the money you skimmed from your clients, the money you were hiding from the IRS, and most importantly, the money you were saving to pay back Rico and his friends." Gavin went white. He dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, swinging back and forth. He scrambled to pick it up, his hand shaking so hard he almost dropped it again. "What did you do?" he screamed. "What did you do with my money?" "I donated it," I said. $200,000, every cent you had left. It went to a fund for victims of financial fraud. It seemed poetic. Gavin let out a sound that was not human. It was the wail of a wounded animal. He slammed his fist against the glass. "You stole it. That was my money. That was Rico's money." "Yes," I said. "And now Rico is not going to get paid, is he?" Gavin stopped screaming. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, his eyes staring into the middle distance, seeing a future that was very short and very violent. "Rico," he whispered. "He will kill me. If I do not pay him, he will kill me in here. He has people everywhere." "I know," I said. "That is why I did it." Gavin looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Bernie, please undo it. Please. You can fix this. You are smart. You can get the money back. I will do anything. I will testify against Beatrice. I will sign whatever you want. Just do not let them kill me." I looked at the man begging for his life, the man who had laughed while planning my demise. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. "I cannot fix this, Gavin," I said. "Structural failure is structural failure. When the foundation is rotten, the collapse is inevitable." "Bernie, please," he shouted, slamming his hands on the glass. "I am family." "You were never family," I said. "You were just a termite." I turned to walk away. "Wait!" Gavin screamed. "How did you do it? How did an old man beat me? I am a broker. I am a genius." I stopped. I looked back at him one last time. "I am a structural engineer, Gavin," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. "I know how to calculate stress. I know how to find weak points. And I know exactly how to pull the supports so the building falls straight down without scratching the house next door." I walked out of the visiting room. Behind me, Gavin was screaming, pounding on the glass, begging for a mercy he had never shown anyone. I walked through the prison gates and into the sunlight. The air was fresh. The sky was blue. I got into my truck. I checked my phone. A notification from the bank. Donation successful. I smiled. Gavin was right about one thing. He was going to be famous. He was going to be the cautionary tale they told in business school and in prison yards for years to come. I started the engine. The demolition was complete. The dust had settled. Now it was time to clear the rubble and plant something new. Part 1. The bank call. 1,300 words. The bank called me and said, "Mr. Freeman, I do not think that is you sitting in my office right now because your wife is here holding the hand of a man who looks exactly like you, and they are liquidating your accounts." I replied, "That is impossible. She is on a church retreat in Atlanta." The voice on the line lowered to a whisper and said, "Please come immediately, use the service entrance, and do not tell a soul." My name is Bernard Freeman, but everyone calls me Bernie. I am 70 years old, and I have spent my life calculating the breaking point of steel and concrete. I am a retired structural engineer. I built bridges that carry thousands of cars every day. I designed foundations that hold up the tallest skyscrapers in this city. I know exactly how much pressure a structure can take before it snaps. But as I sat on that park bench staring at a half-eaten ham sandwich wrapped in wax paper, I realized I had no idea how much pressure a man could take before he broke. Before I tell you what I saw behind that one-way mirror, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a snake in the grass. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of Tuesday that feels like every other Tuesday when you are retired. The sun was shining through the oak trees in the city park. I was wearing my usual attire, a faded flannel shirt, work boots that had seen better days, and a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. To the people walking by, walking their expensive dogs and drinking their $6 coffees, I looked like nobody. Just another old black man eating a cheap lunch. Maybe a janitor on his break, maybe a man down on his luck. They saw the rust on my 15-year-old Ford pickup truck parked at the curb. They did not see the 7-figure balance in my offshore accounts. They did not know that I lived frugally by choice, not by necessity. I was raised to believe that wealth screams, but wealth whispers. I preferred the whisper. My phone buzzed on the wooden bench. It was a private number. I usually ignore those, but something told me to answer. "Mr. Freeman." The voice was tight, anxious. It was Henderson, the branch manager of First City Bank. "Hello, Henderson. I am eating lunch. Is there a problem with the wire transfer?" "Mr. Freeman, listen to me very carefully. We have a code red situation here." I stopped chewing. Code red. That was a security protocol I had designed myself 30 years ago when I consulted on the bank's underground vault construction. It meant an identity breach. It meant immediate danger. What are you talking about, Henderson? Your wife, Beatrice. She is in my office right now. I chuckled a dry sound that scraped my throat. You are mistaken, Henderson. Beatrice is in Atlanta. She left this morning for the annual Baptist Women's Conference. I drove her to the airport myself. I saw her walk through security. There was a pause on the line, a silence so heavy I could feel the weight of it. Mr. Freeman. I am looking at her. She is wearing that blue floral dress she likes. And she is not alone. She is with you. Or at least she is with a man who is wearing your gray Sunday suit, your gold retirement watch, and who has your identification. They are filling out the paperwork to withdraw the entire balance of your primary pension fund in cash. The ham sandwich turned to ash in my mouth. My heart, which usually beat with the slow, steady rhythm of a man at peace, began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. The gray suit, the one I had bought for my daughter Keisha, is graduation 10 years ago. The one I kept in the back of the closet in a garment bag, and the watch. My father's watch. I checked my wrist. It was bare. I had left it on the nightstand this morning because the leather strap was chafing my skin. Hold them there, Henderson. I am 5 minutes away. Do not come in the front door, Mr. Freeman. If this is what I think it is, we cannot spook them. Use the service entrance in the alley, the one with the biometric lock. I will meet you in the security observation room. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. I have not felt fear since I dangled from a suspension cable in 1985. This was not fear, it was rage. A cold, hard rage that started in my gut and spread to my fingers. I walked to my truck. I did not run. A man running attracts attention. A man walking with purpose just looks like he has a job to do. I climbed into the cab of my old Ford. The engine roared to life, a sound I usually loved, but today it sounded like a growl. I pulled into traffic, cutting off a BMW without blinking. Beatrice, my wife of 40 years, the woman who prayed over our breakfast every morning, the woman who scolded me for using coarse language, the woman who was supposed to be singing hymns in Atlanta right now. I thought about the last 10 years, the separate bedrooms, the polite conversations about the weather, the way she pulled away when I tried to touch her shoulder. I thought it was just aging. I thought we were just two old people drifting apart like ice floes. I did not realize she was building a raft to sail away with my life. I parked the truck in the loading zone behind the bank. I knew the cameras were watching me. I walked to the steel door that looked like part of the wall. I placed my hand on the scanner. It hummed and clicked. Access granted. I still had clearance. Henderson respected the man who built his fortress. Henderson was waiting for me in the hallway, his face pale and sweating. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. Bernie. I am so sorry, he whispered. I tried to stall them. I told them the vault timer needed 20 minutes to reset. Take me to the glass. We walked into the security room. It was dark, lit only by the glow of a dozen monitors, but I did not look at the screens. I looked through the large one-way mirror that overlooked the main executive office, and there they were. It was like looking into a twisted funhouse mirror. Beatrice was sitting in the leather guest chair. She looked radiant. She was not wearing the modest expression she wore at home. Her legs were crossed. She was leaning forward, her eyes sparkling with an excitement I had not seen in decades. She was smiling, a genuine hungry smile, and next to her was me, or rather a man who had been carefully crafted to look like me. He was my height. He had my build. He was wearing my gray suit, which fit him slightly better than it fit me. He had a prosthetic nose that mimicked the bump I got from a construction accident in the 90s. He wore a gray wig cut in my exact style. He even had my glasses. But it was the way Beatrice touched him that made me want to vomit. She had her hand on his knee. She was stroking the fabric of my suit with her thumb. She leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and the imposter laughed. It was a coarse, loud laugh. Not my laugh. Who is he? I asked, my voice sounding like grinding stones. We do not know, Henderson said, but his ID checks out. It is a high-quality forgery. If I did not know you personally, Bernie, I would have processed the transaction without a second thought. I watched the imposter pick up the pen. He held it in his left hand. I am right-handed. He is signing the authorization, Henderson said, pointing to the glass. He is forging your signature. Beatrice provided the power of attorney documents claiming you have early onset dementia and need assistance, but that you are lucid enough to sign today. Dementia. That was their angle. That was the narrative. I watched the pen move across the paper. I watched Beatrice watching the pen. Her eyes were not on the man. They were on the paper. They were on the money. She looked at Henderson, who was back in the room with them. I could see him on the other side of the glass playing his part while I stood next to his deputy in the dark room. "Mr. Henderson." "How much longer?" the imposter asked. His voice was a rasp deeper than mine. "Just a few moments," Mr. Freeman Henderson said inside the room. "The system is verifying the liquidity." I stood there in the dark, clutching the back of a chair so hard my knuckles turned gray. I had a choice. I could burst through that door right now. I could tackle the imposter. I could scream at Beatrice. I could call the police and have them arrested for fraud right here, right now. It would be satisfying. It would be explosive. But then I looked at Beatrice again. I saw the way she checked her phone nervously. I saw the notification pop up on her screen. I have excellent eyesight for my age. The message read, "Gavin says the jet is ready. Do not mess this up. Gavin." My son-in-law. The white boy from Connecticut who married my daughter Keisha. The investment banker who always looked at my truck with disdain. The man who called me Pops with a sneer. If Gavin was involved, this was not just a wife stealing from a husband. This was a conspiracy. This was a network. If I arrested them now, Beatrice would claim she was duped. She would claim this man tricked her. She would play the victim. Gavin would stay in the shadows. They would escape with a slap on the wrist, and I would be the angry old man who almost had a heart attack in a bank. No. I am an engineer. You do not fix a crack in the foundation by painting over it. You dig. You find the source of the rot. You expose the entire structural failure. Henderson's voice came over the intercom into the security room. "Bernie, what do you want me to do? I can trigger the silent alarm. The police are 2 minutes away." I watched the imposter finish signing. I watched Beatrice squeeze his hand in victory. "Do not call the police," I said. What Henderson asked, his voice shocking. "They are stealing $400,000, Bernie. That is your pension. Let them take it," I said. "Bernie, are you crazy?" I turned to the deputy standing next to me. "Do you have those GPS trackers? The little ones you put in the die packs for bank robbers?" "Yes, sir," the deputy said. "Put one in the bag. Do not use the die pack, just the tracker. And put a second tracker deep in the lining of the bag itself in case they switch the money," Bernie Henderson said over the intercom. "You are letting them walk out of here with nearly $500,000. It is not just money, Henderson. It is bait." I watched them. I watched the man who was wearing my life. I watched the woman who had shared my bed. They were not just stealing my past. They were trying to steal my future. Give them the money I ordered. And Henderson, make sure you wish them a wonderful trip to Atlanta. I saw Henderson on the other side of the glass take a deep breath. He opened the drawer. He began counting the stacks of cash. Beatrice's eyes widened. She licked her lips. It was a look of pure avarice, a look of hunger. I realized then that I did not know this woman. The Beatrice I loved had died a long time ago. This was a stranger, a predator. And she had no idea that she was not the hunter. She was the prey. I watched them pack the money into a leather duffel bag. My leather duffel bag. The one I used for the gym. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," the imposter said, standing up. "Yes, thank you. God bless you," Beatrice added, using God as name while she committed a felony. They turned to leave. I stood in the dark room, my eyes fixed on the back of my own gray suit, walking out the door. "Follow them on the cameras," I told the deputy. "I want to know what car they get into. I want the license plate and send the tracker signal to my phone." "Yes, sir." I walked out of the security room back into the alley. The sun was still shining, but the world felt colder, darker. I climbed back into my truck. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like cardboard. My phone pinged. The tracker was active. They were moving south toward the interstate. Not toward the airport, toward the casino district. "Gavin says the jet is ready." So my son-in-law was the pilot of this crash. I started the engine. I was not going to intervene. Not yet. I was going to watch. I was going to learn. And when the time was right, I was going to bring the whole structure down on top of their heads. I drove out of the alley. I was no longer Bernie, the retired engineer. I was Bernie, the architect of their destruction. And the first brick had just been laid. The Atlantic Ocean crashed against the cliffs below my terrace with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. It was a year to the day since the police cars had rolled away from my house in the suburbs, leaving silence in their wake. Now I lived in a villa on the coast of Portugal, where the air smelled of salt and jasmine, and the only noise was the cry of seagulls and the scratch of my pencil against drafting paper. I was not retired. Not really. An engineer never truly stops building. I was working on a suspension bridge for a small village in Mozambique that had been cut off from the nearest hospital by a river that flooded every rainy season. I was not doing it for money. I was doing it because bridges connect people, and after a lifetime of watching connections break, I wanted to build something that would hold. The morning sun warmed my back. I wore a linen shirt and sandals. My knees still ached when the weather turned, but the constant knot of tension in my chest, the one that had lived there for 10 years, was gone. I no longer looked over my shoulder. I no longer checked my bank accounts 10 times a day to see if they were being drained. I took a sip of espresso. It was strong and bitter, just the way I liked it. I looked at the blueprints spread out on the teak table. The load calculations were perfect. The tensile strength was sufficient. It was going to be a good bridge. I heard footsteps on the stone patio. They were light, confident steps. "Good morning, Mr. Freeman," a voice said. I turned around. Cyrus was standing there, holding a silver tray with a pitcher of water and a thick envelope. He looked different. The hollow cheeks were gone, filled out by a year of good food and sobriety. The shakes were gone. He wore a crisp polo shirt and khaki shorts. He looked younger, healthier. He looked like a man who'd been given a second chance and had grabbed it with both hands. "Good morning, Cyrus," I said. "How is your Portuguese coming along?" "It is getting better," he said with a smile, placing the tray on the table. "The baker understood me this morning, so I consider that a victory." Cyrus was no longer an actor playing a part. He was my property manager, my assistant, and in a strange way the son I should have had. I had paid for his rehab. I had given him a job. And he had repaid me with a loyalty that Gavin had never possessed. The mail arrived, Cyrus said, tapping the envelope. "It is the final report from Ms. Sterling." I wiped my hands on a rag. I had been waiting for this. "Read it to me, Cyrus," I said. "I want to hear it from you." Cyrus opened the envelope. He pulled out the legal documents with a reverence he used to reserve for a bottle of vodka. He adjusted his reading glasses. "United States District Court," he read. "Sentencing memorandum, defendant Gavin Miller." He looked up at me. 20 years, Mr. Freeman. No parole eligibility for 15. The judge cited the predatory nature of the crimes and the lack of remorse. He is going to a maximum security facility in upstate New York. 20 years. Gavin would be 60 when he got out. He would be an old man with nothing. No money, no family, no future. He would know exactly what it felt like to be the person he tried to turn me into. And the restitution I asked. "Ordered in full," Cyrus said. "But since he has no assets, the court has garnished his future wages indefinitely. If he ever earns a dime, 50 cents of it belongs to the victim's fund." I nodded. It was justice. Cold, hard, and structural. "And Beatrice?" I asked, looking out at the ocean. Cyrus flipped to the next page. He hesitated. "She took a plea deal," he said quietly. 5 years probation. But the civil suits took everything. The house was foreclosed. Her pension was seized to pay legal fees. Where is she now? "She is living in a studio apartment in the city," Cyrus read. "She is working as a dishwasher at a diner on 4th Street. The report says she tried to contact Keisha, but Keisha refused to take the call. A dishwasher. Beatrice, who refused to touch a dirty plate without rubber gloves. Beatrice, who judged the world from her high horse. Now she was scrubbing the grease off other people's plates. And Keisha." Charges dropped in exchange for testimony against Gavin, Cyrus said. "But she lost custody of Leo. The state placed him with a foster family in Vermont. A good family, according to Ms. Sterling. The trust fund you set up for him is secure. He will get it when he is 21, provided he has no contact with his parents." I closed my eyes. Leo, my grandson. He was the only innocent beam in a collapsing structure. I hoped the distance would save him. I hoped the money would give him the freedom to be different. "That is all of it?" Cyrus asked. "That is all of it, Mr. Freeman. The file is closed." He set the papers down. He poured me a glass of water. "You saved me." "You know," Cyrus said suddenly. His voice was thick with emotion. I was dead in that alley. You gave me a life. I looked at him. I saw the clear eyes. I saw the steady hands. You saved yourself, Cyrus, I said. I just gave you the tools. You did the work. He nodded. He looked at the blueprints. That is a beautiful bridge. It will hold, I said. That is all that matters. I stood up. I walked to the edge of the terrace. The wind whipped my shirt. I looked down at the rocks where the waves were breaking into white foam. I had one more thing to do. Bring me the other folder, Cyrus. The blue one. Cyrus handed it to me. It contained my last will and testament, the final draft. I had no heirs. Not anymore. I had cut the rot out. But I still had a fortune that Gavin had tried to kill for, a fortune that Beatrice had betrayed me for. I took my pen. It was a heavy fountain pen. I uncapped it. I turned to the last page. I, Bernard Freeman, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath my entire estate, assets, and intellectual property to the Veterans Engineering Corps and the Global Fund for Underprivileged Children. I signed my name, with my right hand, firm, clear, unshakable. I, Bernard Freeman. There would be no confusion. There would be no contest. There would be no vultures circling my grave waiting for a payout. I handed the folder to Cyrus. Send it to Ms. Sterling, I said. Overnight delivery. Yes, sir. Cyrus took the folder and walked back into the villa. I was alone again. I looked at the ocean. I thought about the blood that ran through my veins. I thought about the family I had tried to build and the family I had been forced to destroy. They say blood is thicker than water. That is what people say to keep you trapped. That is what they say to make you forgive the unforgivable. But I looked at the water stretching out to the horizon. It was vast. It was powerful. It was clean. Blood can be poisoned. Blood can carry disease. Blood can rot from the inside out. But water washes everything away. I had filtered my life. I had removed the impurities. I had drained the swamp. And now, standing here in the sunlight with the sound of the waves in my ears, I finally understood the most important principle of engineering. You cannot build a future on a cracked foundation. You have to clear the site. You have to dig down to the bedrock. And sometimes you have to stand alone in the rubble before you can start to build again. I took a deep breath of the salty air. I was Bernard Freeman. I was 71 years old, and I was just getting started. We spend so much of our lives trying to shore up the foundations of our families, believing that blood is the strongest bond of all. But I learned the hard way that a rotten beam will eventually bring down the whole house, no matter how much you love it. Loyalty should never come at the cost of your dignity. You cannot save people who see you only as a resource to be consumed. True family is not about DNA. It is about respect. Do not be afraid to walk away from the wreckage. Sometimes you have to be your own architect and build a life that finally stands strong on its own. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make the hard choice to cut a toxic family member out of your life? Because I read every single one.